Story 1. A Karen was stealing electricity to charge her son's electric quad bike, so I installed a circuit that fried her setup. There was a spark, a dry bang, and soon after, the most glorious scream I've ever heard coming across the fence. Karen, my entitled neighbor, was screaming as if her Gucci sneakers had caught fire. Technically, what caught fire was her son's quad bike charger. And technically, she deserved it. You don't steal electricity from an electrical engineer and think you'll get away with it. Not after I warned her, after the homeowners association ignored me, and especially after she said, "It's just a little bit of energy. Relax." Oh, I relaxed. All right. I lit up her yard with enough voltage to transform that generic quad bike into a toaster. But let's go back a bit to understand this explosive moment of karmic justice. You need to know that it all started with a strange jump on my home energy monitor. I'm not just a guy with a multimeter and a grudge. I'm a certified systems engineer, and I design energy infrastructure for data centers. Electricity is my thing. I love it. When my solar inverter started registering phantom consumption outside peak hours, I noticed it right away. Most people wouldn't even notice. I live in a quiet neighborhood where people brag about their lawn edges and their own organic compost. I keep to myself, tinkering with my home network and hunting anomalies. That week, I noticed something weird. Every night between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., there was a consumption of 1.8 kilowatts that didn't match any of my appliances. It wasn't the air conditioner, nor the jacuzzi, nor the backup battery cycling. It was something external. That's when I suspected the leech next door. Karen. You know the type. Super expensive sunglasses, ship horn voice, and zero notion of others' boundaries. She moved here 2 years ago after a messy divorce and has been parading poor decisions ever since. Drunken wine brunches and homeowners association fines that mysteriously never stick. Her favorite pastime? Making up rules and citing the homeowners association as if it were the Constitution. She once yelled at a 10-year-old because he rode his bike too close to her hydrangeas. Lately, her obsession was a turbocharged electric quad bike she bought for her teenage son. Noisy, flashy, and worse, powered by electricity. I noticed the cable when I was trimming the hedge. An orange cable slithering over the fence like a snake and disappearing behind my tool shed. I blinked. Impossible, I thought. I don't even have an external outlet there. Unless, no, she wouldn't be that brazen. That night, I turned off all the external circuit breakers except one, just to test. In the morning, there it was, a gap in the records at exactly 2:12 a.m. I went to the fence. The cable was no longer there, retracted, hidden. But I had taken photos in time. I decided to talk to her politely. Maybe it was an accident. Her son plugged in without realizing. I knocked on her door the next day. She opened, wearing leggings, sunglasses, and holding a mimosa as if she were the queen of brunch. I mentioned the consumption and asked if anyone in her house might have used my outlet. She blinked, smiled, and said, "Oh, that is just for a quick charge while they are fixing the garage panel. You have solar energy, right? You won't even miss it." That's not how electricity works, nor authorization, I explained. I told her that it was theft, however small, and that it interferes with my system. She gave me a little pat on the arm. "Relax, Karate Kid. We're not draining your car battery." I left before saying something I shouldn't, but my mind was already working. I called the homeowners association and reported the theft. They said they would investigate. 3 days later, I received a warning for creating a hostile dynamic and making dangerous modifications to the fence. Guess what? Karen said I had installed electrical traps threatening her family. I was shocked, but I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I'm not confrontational, but if you plug into my network without asking and then lie, you've entered my territory. Karen didn't know what she had activated. She thought I was just the quiet neighbor with solar panels. She didn't know I designed fail-safe systems for military servers, that I once set up a mini emergency network for a hospital with just spare parts and caffeine. And she definitely didn't know that I was about to turn her nightly party into an expensive fireworks show. I drafted the plan that same night. A bait outlet irresistible, connected to a perfectly legal circuit. Safe but destructive enough to leave her charger in ashes without putting anyone at risk. It had to be subtle, invisible, and above all personal because she didn't just steal energy. She disrespected my profession. I installed the fake outlet on my side of the fence at an angle that looked like carelessness, as if it had been left in a conduit of the shed. Tempting, unprotected, energized. Except it wasn't. The outlet was connected to an impedance circuit, calibrated to fry any charger that pulled more than 3A. No common household appliance would trigger it, but a quad bike charger? Certainly. I set the trap. I waited. 3 nights later, the cable appeared again. Wrapped, plugged in. I watched from my workshop, sipping tea. At 2:17 a.m., the register showed a spike exactly as I had planned. The circuit went into action. Blue flash, dry crack, and the grand finale. Karen's scream tearing through the night like karaoke ground in a blender. I saw her son running in his underwear, trying to understand why his six-pack abs were now smoking like Halloween decorations. I've never smiled so much, but that was just the beginning. Karen thought she could steal from an engineer and get away unscathed. The voltage that fried the charger was nothing compared to what I was still going to pull off. When the homeowners association got involved again, they made the fatal mistake. They took her side. Then it was war. The morning after the great short circuit, the spectacle continued. I woke up to her stamping her flip-flopped foot, muttering about sabotage, and calling the fire department. I stayed at the window with fresh coffee, watching it live. The cable had disappeared. The quad bike was covered with a tarp crime scene, and Karen wouldn't let go of her cell phone, dramatically narrating how her son was almost electrocuted by a deadly trap. Except there was no shock, just a toasted charger. But I wasn't celebrating yet. That had just been the first act. She hadn't learned her lesson. In fact, near noon I received a visit. A guy in khakis and a polo shirt, clipboard in hand, flaunting the arrogance of someone who thinks they're going to set things straight. You cannot install unauthorized electrical devices on the property line. He fired without even introducing himself. Guess what? Karen had complained to the homeowners association again, and now they were here to reprimand me for dangerous installations that threaten the community. I held back laughter as he cited regulations. Most had nothing to do with electricity and everything to do with Karen's creativity in interpreting the community manual. I explained that the outlet in question was on my property, legally installed and in compliance with the code. What he didn't know, and what I chose not to mention for now, was that it had a non-lethal surge induction loop triggered when the current exceeded a certain limit. Totally harmless to people, animals, or unsuspecting squirrels, but catastrophic for sensitive electronics. He made a note on his clipboard and mumbled something about further analysis. I escorted him out politely and offered a cookie. He refused. That's when I knew the story wasn't over. If she was like any entitled person, Karen would double down. They always escalate. And I would have to escalate too, not in pettiness but in precision. She wanted to play? Fine. Can play too. But I wasn't going to wait for another cable to crawl over the fence. I needed to know the exact moment it happened. I went back to the drawing board and did what I know how to do. I built a smarter trap. First, I updated the fake outlet. The original circuit had worked, but now I wanted real-time feedback. I added a data logger hidden inside an old garden gnome connected to my home server. Whenever something was plugged in, it would record the date, time, voltage, and consumption, and send an alert to my cell phone. If it exceeded the limit, the outlet would release a timed voltage spike. Not enough to start a fire, but enough to make any charger go puff. I tested it exhaustively on an old leaf blower twice. Then I installed motion-sensing cameras camouflaged in birdhouses and reflectors. Material that had been sitting in the garage since an unfinished security upgrade now had a purpose. One camera pointed at the fake outlet, another at the corner of Karen's yard where the ATV was kept, and the third watching the common fence. Everything went to my server and to the cloud. If Karen sneezed near the outlet, I would have footage. But the trump card was the bait extension cord. I left it hanging on my fence, deliberately coiled, as if I had been lazy in gardening. It was plugged into the dummy outlet and looked functional, except the wiring passed through a surge circuit buried under the flower bed. If Karen or her offspring decided to pull the cord to use again, they would get another little present. 3 nights passed with no activity. I almost thought she had learned, but on the 4th night, exactly 1:42 a.m., my cell phone vibrated. Consumption detected, 2.7 kilowatts and rising. Soon after, another alert, limit exceeded. Surge triggered. I opened the live feed and saw in real time the flash illuminating the birdhouse camera. The cable shook, the charger sparked, and the ATV let out an ouch as if giving its last breath. Karen's son, shirtless and confused, jumped back like a startled deer. He tried to pull the plug, but it was too late. Smoke rose from the charger again. Not as dramatic as the first time, but enough to send the message. I smiled, satisfied. The system worked. It worked perfectly. In the morning, the cable disappeared again, but the damage was done for the second time, and I had video, date, time, and location. This time, I didn't wait for the homeowners association to come with more nonsense. I printed a stack of captures and went straight to their office. The attendant, Janice, I think, flipped through everything, eyes wide, face closing. "You're saying she plugged into your outlet without authorization?" she asked. "Twice," I replied. "I have complete logs and footage. Take a look at the bylaws. Section 8B, unauthorized access to utilities." Janice pursed her lips. She knew the rule, but Karen was close to 2 board members, so it wouldn't be that simple. "We'll need a formal analysis," she said. "In the meantime, I suggest removing external outlets to avoid escalation." "Janice," I said, leaning in, "this community finds mailbox colors, but lets Karen pull illegal cables over the fence." I was patient. I kept to myself. "But I don't think you understand the system I have here. If you want, I'll cut my entire house from the grid and live 6 months just on battery. I don't need your outlet policy. I need you to enforce the rules. Or I'll take this material to the city utility company and report the theft." She blinked, mouth opening and closing. "The ball's in your court," I concluded as I left. That night, Karen came stomping up to my porch. No mimosa, no sunglasses, just fury. She demanded to know what I had done to her ATV. I said I had no idea what she was talking about. She yelled that her son was traumatized. I replied that maybe he should stop stealing energy. She threatened to sue me. I warned her that I had footage, logs, and an engineering degree that said otherwise. Then I handed her a flash drive. "What's this?" she growled. "Everything you need to realize you chose the wrong neighbor," I replied, calmly closing the door. She didn't knock again, but I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Entitled people like Karen don't give up. After a defeat, they move on to retaliation. It's always been that way. And when it happened, I would be ready with more than a surge circuit. I would have the truth, the law, and a neighborhood full of witnesses because I discovered that I wasn't the only one Karen had been stealing from. And when the rest of the folks found out, that's when the real electrical storm would begin. 3 days after I delivered the flash drive, the fireworks began. Not the literal ones, those had already happened with the smoking charger, but the social ones. Karen didn't get the message. If she thought I was bluffing, she decided to double down like only a suburban tyrant can. That morning, a police car parked in my driveway. The officer was polite but firm. Apparently, Karen had filed a report accusing me of deliberately installing a dangerous electrical apparatus that had put her family at risk. I asked the officer if she had also mentioned that her family had plugged into my outlet on my property and that I had security images proving it. The officer blinked. "She didn't mention that," he replied, almost embarrassed. I invited him in, took him to my office, opened the videos, and walked him through each second of Karen's son connecting the cable, the time-stamped records showing the energy diversion the second time after the first charger had fried. I also showed him the schematic of the outlet, all identified, installed according to code, programmed to trigger only in high current. Totally safe for people, fatal only for electricity thieves. The officer leaned back in his chair and scratched his head. "Wow, you don't mess around." "Indeed, officer," I replied. "I don't play games, but they do, and they're dragging the law into their tantrum." He closed his notebook. "Look, from what I see here, she doesn't have a case at all." This is energy theft, plain and simple. I'll file the report. If she insists, you're covered with evidence. Honestly, this kind of mess dies when it becomes paperwork. I thanked him. When the patrol car left, I noticed Karen across the street. Arms crossed, sunglasses on, sipping, I bet, the 5th iced latte of the day. She watched the car leave and then shot a withering look at my house as if challenging me to come out. I didn't give her that pleasure. I had bigger plans. The Homeowners Association soap opera wasn't over yet. The next day, an official letter arrived, golden seal and all, as if it were a royal court, but it was just a bunch of bored retirees. They said I had violated Section 12A, unauthorized electrical installations that posed a risk to community safety. Attached was a $500 fine and mandatory inspection order. Now I was angry. I filed my own complaint packed with photos, logs, videos, and a complete technical report. I copied the city works inspector and the utility company. If the Homeowners Association wanted to play serious, I would call in the real adults. Then something unexpected happened. Neighbors started coming to me. First was Tom, owner of the outdoor kitchen, fully equipped, 2 houses down. Then Nancy, who would wave but hardly ever spoke. Next, the Patel family, who run a catering service from home. One by one, they came with very specific questions. Hey, have you noticed your refrigerator blinking as if it lost power at night? Have your motion lights ever reset by themselves? Has Karen ever asked to use your external outlets? That last one hit home. I asked if they had experienced similar power outages. Tom nodded. His outdoor mini-fridge had been losing temperature overnight. Nancy mentioned that her garden lights would flicker around 2 a.m. and reset. The Patels recounted how an entire freezer had thawed weeks ago thanks to a mysteriously tripped circuit breaker. That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't stealing just from me. She was running a theft network across the entire block. I invited everyone over for coffee and presented my monitoring system, explained the traps, and showed the video of her son invading my yard to plug in the charger. The crowd was speechless. Tom burst out laughing. I knew she was shameless, but this is a gold medal in theft. We created a phone group that day, shocked by Karen. In hours, it had 10 members. By night, 23. We discovered she had been siphoning energy from half the neighborhood for months. Her son would plug extensions into unlocked outlets, garden points, even into an RV hookup while the owner was traveling. No one had proof until now. We went house by house installing locks or covers on external outlets. I helped Tom set up a smart monitor. Nancy authorized a bait cable in her yard, too. It was no longer revenge. It was community justice. We were tired of the theft, the cynicism, and the pose of someone who thinks rules bend for her. The monthly Homeowners Association meeting arrived, usually a bore of discussing planter heights and porch colors. Not this time. We showed up in force. Flash drives, screenshots, spreadsheets. One by one, we took the floor and exposed everything. Karen, in the front row, arms crossed, jaw clenched, looked like a cat dropped in a kennel. She tried to speak, tried to deflect. They're exaggerating. This is gossip, jealousy. But the Homeowners Association president, Greg, a former ally of hers, was squirming uncomfortably. Even he couldn't ignore numbers, videos, and my police report delivered in a nice envelope. Then came the bombshell. A neighbor brought in utility bills for the entire year. The value had jumped without explanation just when Karen bought the ATV. Another cross-referenced circuit breaker dates. Everything matched. We built an ironclad case. Karen stood up, shouted that it was persecution, that she had a right to use the community electricity since the Homeowners Association fees were expensive. Yes, she said, community electricity, as if our outlets were a public square. It was the shot in the foot. The room exploded in protests. Not even Greg saved her. The board voted to suspend her privileges, complete an investigation, and apply fines. There was even talk of a restraining order. Karen left huffing, almost knocking over the punch table. But it wasn't over yet. There was another revelation, something even I didn't expect. She wasn't using the stolen energy just to charge the ATV. She was hosting parties in her backyard, professional lighting, mini fridges, karaoke, all discreetly plugged into other people's outlets. Her yard was a parasitic nightclub, and I had the images. The storm wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. After the explosive meeting and suspension of privileges, what seemed like just a neighborhood annoyance turned into a full case of serial utility theft with much larger implications. The thing now required a more technical and thorough treatment. A detailed audit of consumption history, metadata correlations, and forensic review of several months of recordings. Given the numerous complaints from residents, it became clear that Karen's behavior was not limited to sporadic energy pulls. There was a clear pattern of repeated and calculated abuse of infrastructure that did not belong to her. The starting point for the in-depth investigation was precisely in the data collected by the bait systems that I and other neighbors had recently installed. With formal consent, I integrated new smart monitors in several homes affected by the mysterious energy deficit. When all the data was synchronized and overlaid on the electrical map of the neighborhood, a clear picture emerged of consumption spikes caused by external equipment connected and disconnected in the dead of night. The timestamps almost perfectly matched the footage of Karen's son wandering between yards, often disguised as someone who went to fetch a ball or tend to the garden. I went further. I analyzed phase fluctuations and identified transient voltage drops in the subnet serving the street. These weren't normal residential spikes, but indicators of high amperage devices, most likely vehicle chargers or industrial equipment. In other words, an improper use of domestic installations for equipment they should never support, constituting not only a civil infraction but possibly a crime of public utility theft. As I was closing this report, I received feedback from the municipal energy auditor to whom I had sent all the technical documentation. He confirmed the seriousness of the case. What started as theft between neighbors now qualified as utility fraud typified in the city code. If the diversion exceeded a certain threshold, and it had, the law provided for criminal liability and recovery charges. The sum of diversions attributed to Karen was over 3,000 kilowatts in 4 months. Beyond the technical data, testimonies emerged. Extensions snaking through lawns, lights on in sheds that no one used, circuit breakers tripping out of nowhere. An emblematic case came from a neighbor whose smart irrigation would stop without reason. The record showed voltage drops exactly during Karen's little parties. These reports reinforced the dossier. Using drone images and analyzing luminosity frame by frame, I reconstructed Karen's party circuit. Light strings, amplifiers, coolers, and karaoke, all demanding at least 2.2 kilowatts, far beyond incidental use. And all this load came from extensions crossing fences, passing through service entrance boxes, and, in one case, connected to an irrigation box she redesigned without permission. Armed with the evidence, I helped 2 neighbors file a formal complaint with the utility company and requested a complete audit of the street's distribution. In parallel, a lawyer hired by one of the families prepared a civil action for material damages. The plan was simple: demand direct financial reimbursement, open a criminal investigation, and pressure the Homeowners Association to update the regulations to address energy theft. Karen, meanwhile, continued to act as if she were the target of persecution, calling the movement neighborhood fascism in heated conversations at the club. None of this shook the numbers against her. Feeling her own credibility draining away, the Homeowners Association called an emergency meeting. This time, they abandoned the push and shove and took action. Karen was removed from all committees, lost access to common areas, and received a formal order to disconnect any improper cable crossing boundaries. The next blow came by registered letter from the utility company. Investigation for meter tampering and energy theft according to Municipal Code 4.3.7, with a scheduled inspection. Karen ignored the warning, and in this case, the next step is a judicial summons. As the news spread, the neighborhood's mood changed from frustration to a sense of victory. Those who had suffered silently for months finally felt heard. Even residents who hadn't lost energy began to complain about Karen's history of privileges. Then came the final bill. The utility company calculated a debt of over $1,800 just in retroactive energy. Adding homeowners association fines, attorney fees, and structural violations, Karen found herself facing a financial hole impossible to attribute to a misunderstanding between neighbors. The official documentation alone exceeded 60 pages, with high-resolution captures, legal definitions, consumption comparisons, and a summary of the community impact. At no point did Karen apologize or take responsibility, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. She took refuge in denial. But in this scenario, denial wasn't a defense. It was just admitting that she had underestimated the neighbor's ability to react, not with tantrums, but with precision, paperwork, and teamwork. The consequences were no longer hypothetical. Now they were measurable, enforceable, and backed by authorities. And upon reviewing the final report, what struck me most was realizing how all of this would have been avoided if Karen had simply asked. A conversation, a polite request, and the story would have been different. But the sense of entitlement, when not contained, becomes delusion, dismantled here data point by data point. In the weeks that followed Karen's spectacular downfall, the neighborhood underwent a transformation. For the first time in years, people waved with genuine smiles, not with tired looks. The group that started as a support line against theft became a space to exchange gardening tips, announce events, and send memes about extension cords. In a way, her chaos brought us together. The set of timid houses turned into a front of neighbors who talked to each other, and the common enemy was disconnected. Karen, on the other hand, wasn't adapting to the new reality. Her yard was frighteningly quiet. The ATV, anti-symbol of status and rebellion, disappeared. They say it was sold to pay compensation and fees. The karaoke equipment, little lights, and powerful speakers also vanished. Gone were the low-budget Coachella-style Friday nights, replaced by silence and a bizarre collection of gnomes scattered on the lawn. A desperate attempt to appear as a cute neighbor instead of an energy thief. The son, former prince of the cul-de-sac, was demoted to handyman. Mowing grass, picking up trash, pulling weeds. Punishment or an attempt to regain goodwill. No one knows. What's certain is that the ATV days are over. The boy now avoids making eye contact with anyone. Meanwhile, the HOA faced its own catharsis. After the meeting where the web of theft was exposed, several directors resigned or lost their positions. There were new elections, and this time the neighborhood really participated. A former firefighter named Gwen became president and didn't waste time. She drafted a revised statute explicitly prohibiting utility theft, authorizing random inspections upon complaint, and creating automatic fines for anyone tampering with installations. She also limited the distance of electrical setups from property lines and required inspection seals on external systems. They invited me to the Safety and Infrastructure Subcommittee. I politely declined but promised occasional consultation. Gwen understood. I don't seek the spotlight. I just want my neighborhood free of absurdities. With the new rules, several neighbors took the opportunity to modernize their electrical systems. I helped some install tamper-proof outlets and taught others to monitor consumption with simple tools. Some joked, "Open the shock guard. It'll be a hit." I laughed, but the idea of turning all this learning into something productive stuck in my mind. As for Karen, the final blow was the true eviction. Not from the house, but from illusions. The city fined her for energy theft. The HOA charged successive violations. The neighbors she disdained now avoided her. Isolated, demoralized, and without energy. Literally. She continued trying to sustain the old persona. On a spring afternoon, as we tended to our gardens, she appeared dragging a noisy hose, went to the center of the yard, and began watering the flowers, humming loudly a song no one heard. Someone wrote in the group, "Karen testing the waters again." But like before, no one took the bait. Without energy, there is no chaos. This time, in every sense, I started checking my cameras less and less. The bait outlet remained untouched, the logs clean. I thought about dismantling the system, but something about it seemed like a badge. Not of war, of vigilance. A reminder that when good people stand up to persistent disrespect, even if it comes in pastel leggings and a fake smile, the result is peace. One day, adjusting my solar system, I heard a voice. "Hi." I turned. Karen was at the boundary of my property, looking like she hadn't slept in days. No sunglasses, no pose. "What is it?" I asked calmly. She hesitated. I think I owe you an apology." I was surprised but not moved. For what exactly? For the theft? For the lies? For the false report? For the circus at the HOA? She blinked. She didn't expect such frankness. For all of that, she murmured. I was wrong. Silence. She cleared her throat. I didn't think it was so serious. I thought it was harmless. It's never harmless to take what isn't yours, I replied. Especially repeatedly. She nodded. I understand now. She was silent for a second. Well, that's it. She turned and went back home, slow steps, head down. I didn't forgive her right there, nor did I fully believe in the remorse. But maybe it was a start. Maybe she finally understood that electricity wasn't the only thing she was draining. At night, I sat on the porch with tea, watching the sun disappear behind the rooftops, the orange sky, the still air. And for the first time in months, I felt genuine peace. No ATV noise, no invading cables, no spikes on the monitor. Just silence and the wind in the trees. Some neighbors passed by and waved. A boy rode by on a regular bike without an electric turbo. I smiled. Peace, I discovered, is not something you wait for. Sometimes you design it yourself, do the right wiring, protect it with your fingernails and teeth, and if someone tries to steal it, well, you give them a shock they'll never forget. Now on to the next story. Story 2. I refused to give money to my parents when they needed it the most, even after they had helped me my entire life, and today I feel like a monster because of it. For as long as I can remember, I always knew we were humble. We weren't rich, not even close, but I never felt like I lacked anything. My parents always found a way to provide me with everything I needed, and that included much more than just food and clothes. They gave me opportunities. My father worked from sunrise to sunset, taking extra shifts and accepting any side job he could find. My mother, just as dedicated, juggled 2 jobs to make sure I had something they never had: a quality education. They believed that studying was the key to a better future, so they did everything they could to enroll me in the best schools possible, even if it meant constantly living on the edge financially. But as a child, I never realized that. To me, my life was normal. I went to school like everyone else, had lunch packed in my backpack, and wore sneakers that weren't the most expensive but weren't the worst either. My parents never let me see the weight they carried. I didn't notice the overdue bills, the nights my mother slept less because she took on another shift, or the days my father came home exhausted but still sat with me to help with my homework. And the funny thing is, I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Maybe it all started with a game that marked my childhood. Habbo Hotel. I was completely addicted to that game. Anyone who has played it knows how it works. To stand out, you needed money, the famous Habbo credits. And I wanted status in the game. I wanted the best furniture to create popular rooms to make deals, but I didn't have a credit card and my parents couldn't afford to spend money on things like that. So, I started thinking of ways to earn it on my own. I remember when I was about 10 years old and discovered that I could resell Habbo coins within the game. I would buy cheap items and resell them at a higher price, negotiate with players, and make a profit. In no time, I was running my own little empire in the game, and that's when I realized something. I loved it. I loved the idea of entrepreneurship, of making deals, of earning money independently. And while I was there, fascinated by a virtual world of negotiations and strategies, my parents were in the real world working tirelessly to ensure I had an education that would take me much further than an online game ever could. I loved them more than anything. If I could have, I would have done something for them even back then. But for years I never realized just how much they sacrificed. They never let me see the burden of responsibility they carried. But as time went on, reality hit. And when I finally managed to make enough money to repay everything they had done for me, what happened was the complete opposite of what I had imagined. If I had to describe my teenage years in a few words, I'd say they were a mix of admiration, ambition, and ignorance. I saw my parents as true heroes. They always found a way to fix everything, always made sure I had the best opportunities even when it was clear they couldn't afford it. I grew up admiring their strength while also believing that the world worked in a much simpler way than it actually did. I didn't realize how much my parents struggled to keep our lives running. To me, it was as if they had some kind of superpower. Money appeared when it was needed, bills got paid somehow, and food was always on the table. It didn't matter if my father came home with red, tired eyes or if my mother went days without a break. Everything just seemed to work out in the end, and I never bothered to understand how. While they were constantly trying to balance finances and keep everything together, I became more and more fascinated with the world of business. My interest in entrepreneurship, which started with Habbo Hotel, only grew over time. I didn't just want to work a regular job and earn a paycheck. I wanted to be someone big, someone who had complete control over their financial life. That's when I discovered financial gurus on the internet. Like any curious teenager who spends too much time online, I started consuming videos about wealth, success, and investments. It didn't take long for me to become completely hooked. Every video, every motivational quote, every story of someone going from rags to riches pulled me in. I believed it all. I absorbed every piece of content as if it were a sacred manual for success. And, of course, it wasn't just videos. I started reading finance books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the first. I felt enlightened as I read about the difference between assets and liabilities, about how the rich don't work for money but make money work for them. Then came Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, which talked about the mindset of wealth and how our thoughts about money shape our lives. With each page I read, my mind raced with ideas about how I could escape mediocrity and build something huge. I thought I was smart, really smart. While my classmates were worried about parties and relationships, I was busy planning my financial future. I took notes on strategies, thought about ways to start businesses, and imagined my life 10 years from now already rich and independent. But at the same time, something strange happened. I started seeing my parents differently. Before, they were my heroes. Now, after consuming so much financial content, I started noticing mistakes in what they were doing. Why was my dad still working so hard when he could be investing better? Why was my mom stuck in exhausting jobs instead of finding more profitable alternatives? Why weren't they reading the same books as me? It was as if suddenly I had learned something they had never been taught, and that made me think they were making terrible choices. But I was just a teenager who thought he was wise just because he had read a few books and watched some videos. The truth, which I only realize now, is that I was being naive. My parents weren't dumb. They weren't doing things wrong because they wanted to. They were surviving. The real world doesn't work like it does in finance books or in motivational videos from millionaire gurus. It's not just about thinking like a rich person or investing better. People born into poverty face obstacles that someone from a comfortable background will never fully understand. But back then, I didn't see that. I knew my parents had financial problems, but I never really cared. To me, it was just another phase. I believed they had everything under control. After all, they always had, right? I had never lacked anything, so why should I worry? I saw my dad sit in silence, staring at the bills on the table. I noticed when my mom seemed more exhausted than usual after a long day, but I never asked if they needed help. I never tried to understand the burden they carried because, in my teenage mind, money was just a matter of mindset. And if my parents were always struggling, maybe the problem was how they thought about money. Today, that thought embarrasses me. I didn't realize my mother was sacrificing her own health just so I could continue attending the good school they had chosen for me. I didn't notice that my father was wearing himself down more and more each year from all the heavy labor. I didn't see that they were slowly sinking, all to give me a better future. And I, in my peak teenage arrogance, thought they just weren't thinking about money the right way. It's hard to admit this now. Back then, I only cared about my own plans. I wanted to be rich, successful, independent. My parents, they could keep figuring things out as they always had. It took me years to understand how blind I was. But at the time, I was still fully committed to my dream of entrepreneurship, convinced that I knew exactly how the world worked. And while I was preparing for my great journey to success, my parents continued living one day at a time, carrying a burden I would only come to understand much later. That's when my life took a drastic turn. After spending years consuming books and videos on finance and entrepreneurship, the time came for me to decide my future. I was still young, full of ambition, and determined not to rely on anyone. After finishing my studies, I took a public service exam and, to my surprise, passed. It felt like a dream come true. Job stability, a guaranteed salary, benefits. It was everything someone from my background could ever hope for. My parents were proud. To them, this was proof that all their sacrifices had paid off. I had finally secured a stable position, free from the hardships they had endured their entire lives. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The problem was, I didn't want stability. I wanted freedom. I wanted to put into practice all those entrepreneurial ideas that had been growing in my mind since childhood. Being tied to a fixed job with a salary cap felt suffocating. The longer I stayed in that job, the more I felt like I was wasting my potential. So, after several months, I made a decision that many would consider reckless. I quit to start my own business. My parents were surprised but didn't criticize me. They simply asked if I was sure. And with the arrogance of someone who thinks they know everything, I confidently said yes. I explained that I was tired of depending on a fixed paycheck and wanted to build something of my own. Something big. And they supported me. Even though they didn't fully understand what I was trying to do, they stood by me. At first, I was filled with confidence. I invested all my savings and launched a small business. I was convinced that, armed with the knowledge I had gained from books and financial gurus, I would soon turn this project into a thriving company. But reality hit me hard. Entrepreneurship wasn't as easy as the books made it seem. The market was ruthless, customers didn't appear as expected, and expenses were far higher than I had anticipated. Within months, my business started sinking. I tried everything. I cut costs, looked for ways to boost revenue, experimented with different marketing strategies, but nothing seemed to work. Each month, money became scarcer and the bills piled up. And yet, my parents never stopped supporting me. They saw my frustration, saw that I was on the verge of failure, but never once discouraged me. Instead, they kept reassuring me. Every time I came home feeling defeated, my father would say, "Everyone who has succeeded has gone through struggles first. Don't give up now." My mother comforted me, telling me everything would work out, that I just needed to keep pushing a little longer. They stood by me, believing in me, cheering me on while I didn't even realize they were drowning in debt themselves. It was only when I started paying more attention that I noticed something strange. Despite working for so many years, even earning enough to live with a basic level of comfort, my parents were always in debt. No matter how much money came in, they could never seem to get ahead. And with all the arrogance I still carried, I decided I was going to help them. After all, hadn't I read all those finance books? I knew about investments, budgeting, and how to manage money. I felt entitled to give them advice, as if I had discovered truths they had somehow missed. So I started giving them financial tips. I told them to stop spending money on unnecessary things, that they needed to invest smarter, avoid installment payments, and cut down on frivolous expenses. I spoke as if I had all the answers, as if their financial struggles were simply due to poor money management. What I failed to realize was that I myself was going broke. I, who thought I was so financially savvy, who wanted to teach my parents about money, was on the verge of bankruptcy. I preached about financial intelligence while my own business was collapsing. And that was when I finally saw the truth. My parents' problem was never just money. I could have given them any amount, paid off all their debts at that moment, and within months they would have been in debt again because the problem was deeper than that. It wasn't just about how much they earned. It was about how they viewed money. My parents had grown up in an environment of scarcity. Their entire lives had been about survival, about making ends meet, about making sure I never went without. To them, money was never a tool. It was a constant source of stress, something that was never enough. They had become accustomed to always living on the edge. Whenever they had extra money, instead of saving or investing, they would spend it on something they had wanted for a long time. Because after years of sacrifice, they felt they deserved a little happiness. And I couldn't blame them for that. They had spent decades denying themselves luxuries. How could I expect them to suddenly start acting like the wealthy businessmen from the finance books I had been reading? At that moment, I finally understood. Money isn't just about numbers. It's not just about cutting expenses or making smart investments. Money is tied to emotions, to fears, to deeply ingrained beliefs. And in that moment, I realized my parents didn't need my financial advice. They needed me to understand them. And for the first time in my life, I truly saw my parents not as heroes, not as people who were making mistakes and needed fixing, but as human beings. People who had spent their entire lives fighting, failing, learning, and doing the best they could. From that moment on, everything started to change. But it would take time before I fully grasped the true impact of this realization. After the failure of my first business, I spent years trying to rebuild myself. I didn't want to go back to a traditional job. Entrepreneurship was still my goal, but this time I needed to be smarter. That's when I fully immersed myself in the world of digital business. I spent months studying, testing strategies, and investing what little I had left in courses and tools. I worked with affiliate marketing, tried dropshipping, and created monetized blogs. I experimented with everything. Some projects brought in small returns, while others were complete failures. During this process, I started recognizing my past mistakes. I had been arrogant. I thought I knew everything about money just because I had read a few books and watched some videos online. But nothing replaces real experience. The business world doesn't follow fixed, predictable rules, and I had learned that the hard way. While I was trying to rebuild myself, my parents continued living as they always had. The difference was that now they were elderly and even more consumer-driven. They hated the idea of living with restrictions. Even when money was tight, they would rather spend everything than go without something. To them, not having meat on the table was unthinkable, even if it meant taking on more debt at the grocery store. If they could pay in installments, they did. If they could borrow money, they would. And this became an endless cycle. I saw what was happening and tried to help. I didn't want them to struggle, so I started offering suggestions. I proposed a realistic financial plan tailored to their lifestyle. I showed them how they could save without giving up everything, how they could reduce small expenses and slowly get out of the financial hole. But every time they saved in one area, they spent more in another. If they managed to lower their electricity bill, they would use the savings to buy something unnecessary. If they avoided a new loan this month, by the next month they had already taken out another one. It was frustrating. I tried talking to them, explaining, showing the numbers, but it was like talking to a wall. To them, any extra money meant an opportunity to spend more, never to save. At that point, I decided to stop insisting and fully focus on the digital world. After so many failures, I finally got it right. I created an online store that started doing extremely well. It was a simple idea but well executed. I learned from my past mistakes, and this time I built everything with strategy, without rushing, and without letting blind enthusiasm take over. And suddenly I was making real money. It wasn't an overnight success, but sales were growing steadily. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control. But when the money started coming in, things got serious. My parents, who had struggled with finances their entire lives, saw my new reality and they started looking at me differently. And that's when everything began to change. After that conversation, something changed. My parents kept saying everything was fine, that they understood my decision, but in the small interactions of daily life, I could feel that something had shifted. The phone calls became less frequent. They no longer shared their problems with me as openly as before. Whenever money came up in a conversation, there was an awkward silence, like an invisible barrier had formed between us. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, that nothing had really changed, but the truth was undeniable. Something in our relationship had cooled. There were no fights, no direct accusations, but things simply weren't the same anymore. And even though I kept telling myself I had made the right choice, the guilt kept growing inside me. I wondered if I was being selfish, if I was truly abandoning my parents after everything they had done for me. They weren't bad people. They weren't reckless with bad intentions. They had just spent their entire lives trapped in a cycle of debt and constant expenses because that was how they had learned to survive. And now, with all the financial stability I had worked so hard to build, I was refusing to help them. Every time I saw them, I noticed how much older they had become. My mother didn't have the same energy as before. My father moved slower with more exhaustion, and that only made my guilt worse. But at the same time, I knew that if I gave in, if I started covering their bills, if I bought the house in my name for them to live in, I would never be able to escape from that situation. Because this wasn't temporary assistance. It was a pattern that, once started, would become my responsibility forever. And deep inside, I felt anger, not toward them but toward the situation itself. Why did it have to be like this? Why were there people who could simply live their lives without carrying the financial burdens of their families, while I had to choose between my own stability and my parents' well-being? It was a constant battle within me. With each passing month, my business grew. I was making more money than ever. I could afford luxuries I had never dreamed of. But all of it came with a bitter feeling, as if I was failing in the most important way. Because what was the point of success if I couldn't use it to help the people who mattered most to me? But at the same time, what was the point of helping if it meant sacrificing my own financial future and repeating the same cycle I had worked so hard to break free from? It was a question with no answer. And while I kept battling with my own thoughts, my parents slowly started to drift away. Not in an obvious way, not with fights or arguments, just with silence. A silence that hurt more than any accusation ever could. With my store growing and my financial stability secured, I decided it was time to take the next step in my life. I wanted to expand my business, invest in physical stores, and most importantly, move to a new city to live the life I had always dreamed of. I had worked too hard, failed, learned, and now I wanted to enjoy this new phase with more freedom. During a phone call with my parents, I told them about my plans. I explained that I was moving, that I wanted to invest in new opportunities and build something even bigger. They listened carefully without interrupting, but at the end of the conversation, the inevitable question came up. "And the rent here?" my mother asked in a cautious tone. It was something I had expected. Until now, I had been paying their rent, not because I was obligated to, but because I could afford it without affecting my finances. But now, with my move, I didn't want to keep paying two unnecessary rents. I knew that would set a precedent I didn't want to establish. So I was honest. I explained that it didn't make sense for me to keep paying if I wasn't going to be there anymore, that I wanted them to learn how to manage their money without relying on me. If it weren't for my store, how would things be today? I asked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. My father took a deep breath. My mother stayed silent for a few seconds before responding, "We understand," and they changed the subject. But I knew that, deep down, everything was not fine. They didn't say they were hurt, they didn't make a scene, but I could feel that the conversation hadn't been easy for them. And after I hung up the phone, I just sat there, lost in my thoughts. I worried about them. That was why I kept pushing the conversation about finances. It wasn't coldness, wasn't selfishness. It was because I knew that if they didn't learn to control their spending, their situation would never change. And I didn't want to carry that weight forever. I had no intention of committing to a monthly financial responsibility. I knew that once I started, I would never be able to stop. And even if they never explicitly asked, the expectation would always be there. But at the same time, I felt like a monster. Saying no wasn't easy. Watching my parents grow older and choosing not to take on their financial burdens wasn't easy. And even though I knew my decision was rational, even though I knew I wasn't wrong, it still hurt. Because this was the consequence of being the first in the family to have money. There was no reference, no example to follow. I was the only one who had managed to break out of the cycle of debt and financial struggles, and now I carried the weight of deciding what to do with that position. And it hurt because, deep down, all I really wanted was for things to be different. I've been carrying this guilt for a long time, and no matter how much I try to ignore it, it always comes back. So today, I decided to write this here, hoping someone might give me a different perspective. I refused to give my parents money not because I couldn't, but because I knew that if I started, I would never be able to stop. Because I understood that their problem was never really a lack of money, but rather the way they had always lived. But at the end of the day, does that even matter? My parents spent their entire lives sacrificing for me. I never lacked anything. They always made sure I had the best opportunities, even if it meant living with financial struggles themselves. And when I finally had the chance to give back, I said no. Not because I wanted them to suffer, not because I am ungrateful, but because I knew that if I took on that responsibility, my money would never be just mine again. It would be ours. and I would never be able to say no without feeling the way I do now. I see them getting older and I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. If I were a good person, wouldn't I just pay for everything? Shouldn't I make sure my parents have a comfortable retirement, free of financial worries? Shouldn't I give back everything they did for me? But at the same time, if I do that, wouldn't I just be enabling the same cycle? If I cover all their bills, buy them a house, or send them money whenever they need it, wouldn't I just be creating a new dependency instead of actually helping them? People say that when someone is the first in their family to make money, this kind of burden comes with it. But no one told me how much it would hurt. No one warned me that I would feel guilty every time I said no. No one told me that I would lose sleep at night wondering if I was being rational or just a heartless, selfish person. No one explained that having money doesn't just mean freedom and comfort, but also carrying the invisible expectations of those who have lived in financial scarcity their entire lives. And the worst part? My parents have never demanded anything. They have never guilt-tripped me. They have never thrown their sacrifices in my face. And maybe that makes it even harder. If they had yelled at me, if they had been ungrateful, maybe it would be easier. I could just cut ties and move on with my life. But they simply accepted it. They say they understand. They change the subject whenever money comes up, and it kills me inside. Because deep down, I know that they don't understand. They don't understand why the son they sacrificed so much for, the son who now makes more money than they ever did, chooses not to give them financial support on a regular basis. And I ask myself, does that make me a monster? I'm not a billionaire. I'm not someone who could fix all their problems without feeling it in my bank account. But I'm also not struggling to pay my own bills. I live well. I could help them, but I don't because I know that if I do, I'll never be able to stop. Because I know it wouldn't be a solution. It would just be the beginning of a new financial relationship where I would always have to be there to cover their needs. And I want to live my life. Does that make me a monster? Or am I just doing what any reasonable person would do? I'd really like to know what you would do in my place because honestly, I don't know what to think anymore. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I never thought I'd have to sue my own brother over a birthday party. But here we are. My name's Ryan. I'm 35 and up until a few months ago, I considered myself a pretty chill guy. I'm the kind of person who doesn't sweat the small stuff. Forgot to text me back? No problem. Showed up late to dinner? Whatever. Life's messy. I get it. But if there's one thing I do take seriously, it's my son. His name's Dylan. He just turned 8. And if you've ever had a kid look at you like you hung the moon, you'll understand why this story hurts so much. Dylan's the best thing that ever happened to me. He was born during one of the darkest times in my life, right after my divorce when I was crashing on a buddy's couch trying to rebuild from scratch. His mom and I share custody, but he lives with me most of the week and I've worked hard to give him the kind of stability I never had growing up. My own parents were chaotic at best, but I'll get to them later. For now, let's talk about my younger brother, Jason. He's 33, a year and a half younger than me, and somehow still acts like he's 19. You know the type. Always working on a big idea, always broke, always borrowing money but never paying it back. But he's got this charm about him that makes people, especially our mom, let him off the hook every time. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the one who got good grades, cleaned up, helped out, and never got into trouble. Jason, he could torch the kitchen and somehow get a hug for it. Despite all that, I've always tried to be supportive. I helped him with rent more times than I can count. Got him gigs through people I know. Once, I even floated him $2,500 to launch some ridiculous custom sneaker brand he dreamed up. Never saw that money again, of course. But it's family, right? And Jason has a son, too, Elijah. He's 7, just a few months younger than Dylan. The boys get along decently enough, though Jason's version of parenting leans more toward TikTok babysitter and pizza for dinner every night. Meanwhile, I'm the one taking Dylan to piano lessons and soccer practice, making sure he's brushing his teeth, finishing homework, and yes, celebrating his milestones in a way that lets him feel seen. So, when Dylan's 8th birthday started coming up, I wanted it to be special. Not extravagant, just meaningful. I'd had a rough quarter at work and hadn't taken time off in months, so I figured this was the perfect excuse. Dylan had mentioned he wanted a science-themed party. He's obsessed with space and dinosaurs and explosions. We were driving past the Natural History Museum one day when he pointed at it and said, "I wish I could have my birthday there." That stuck with me. Now, between work and life, I was stretched pretty thin. And Jason, conveniently, was in between jobs, working on a new app. As he put it, he offered to help plan the party. Said it was no big deal. He had connections with vendors and could pull off something epic for Dylan. I was hesitant, but he sold me on it. Said he'd take care of everything. Booking the place, catering, decorations, activities. He even promised a science-themed cake with edible planets on top. To make it easier, I gave him $10,000. Yes, 10 grand to cover the whole thing. Venue, rental, food, the cake, entertainment. I told him to keep whatever was left over as a thank you bonus. I even gave him 3 full weeks of lead time and asked for receipts. He told me not to stress, that he'd handle it, and that it would be the most amazing day of Dylan's life. That's when the first red flag should have hit. Jason doesn't do organized. But I wanted to believe. Maybe, just maybe, this time he'd pull through. Maybe he saw how much this mattered to me. Maybe he was finally ready to step up and show his own son how to follow through on a promise. The first 2 weeks, I didn't hear much. I figured he was busy planning. I asked once about the venue, and he said it was locked in. I asked about the guest list, and he said, "Don't worry. I invited all the kids from Dylan's class and a few family friends." He even sent me a blurry photo of a science-themed balloon arch he claimed he was having custom-made. I was skeptical, but again, I wanted to believe. Then, 3 days before the party, I texted him asking for the final time, date, and location so I could send reminders to parents. No response. I called voicemail. I waited a day and then finally he texted me. Super casual. "Yo bro. Slight change in plans. Can we talk later?" Now I'm sweating. I call him. He answers sounding winded, like he's juggling 5 things at once. "Hey man," he says, "so small thing. The museum ended up being booked. But I found a better spot." Better. "It's this event space downtown," he says. "Very open, very modern. I already sent the invites." "Sent the invites to who?" I asked. "All the important people," he says, brushing it off. "Dylan's classmates, our folks, my friends. You know, it's going to be awesome. Trust me." I was getting annoyed. I asked him to send me the address. He said he would. He didn't. The night before the party, I was in full panic mode. Dylan was bouncing off the walls with excitement, asking if we'd see real fossils or if the cake would have lava on it. I kept reassuring him, even though I had zero clue what was happening. Jason finally texted me at 9:47 p.m. "Doors open at 2 p.m. 525 Oak Street. Dress nice. It's a surprise." Surprise. I didn't like the sound of that, and I really didn't like what I saw when I walked into that venue the next day. But I'll get to that because the moment I opened that door, everything changed. I should have known the second I pulled up to 525 Oak Street that something was wrong. The building was nice, upscale, actually way too upscale for a kid's birthday party. Glass walls, valet out front, and a marquee that read, "Happy 8th Birthday, Elijah," in giant silver lettering. Elijah, not Dylan. I froze. At first, I thought maybe Jason made a mistake. Maybe he gave me the wrong address. Maybe the marquee guy messed up the name. I even triple-checked the invite text on my phone to make sure I hadn't misread it. Nope. 525 Oak Street, 2 p.m. surprise. It was 1:58 p.m. Dylan was in the back seat of my car, wearing his little astronaut hoodie and holding a wrapped box of dinosaur Legos, excited to give them to his best friend, Leo, who he thought would be at the party. He was chattering about whether the cake would erupt like a volcano and if he'd get to touch a real fossil. Meanwhile, my heart was thudding so hard it drowned out every other thought in my head. I didn't want to ruin his moment. Not yet. So, I swallowed my anxiety, forced a smile and said, "Ready, Captain Dylan?" He grinned, buckled his NASA backpack, and jumped out of the car. The moment we walked into the venue, the air shifted. Everything was blue and silver. Giant cutouts of Fortnite characters and race cars were taped to the walls. A DJ in the corner was blasting some remix of Kids Bop. There were no science experiments, no planets, no dinosaurs, no anything Dylan had talked about for weeks. But the worst part? There was a huge banner stretched across the back wall of the main room that read, "Happy birthday, Elijah. You're the star today." My stomach dropped. Jason spotted me before I spotted him. He walked up like nothing was wrong, wearing a matching blue button-up with Elijah and grinning like he just closed a $1 million deal. His girlfriend, Tanya, who I've never gotten along with, was trailing behind him in a sparkly dress, holding a tray of cake pops. "Ryan, you made it," he said, arms wide, pulling me in for a hug. I didn't return it. "Isn't this place sick, Jason?" I said through my teeth, trying not to cause a scene. "What is this?" "It's Elijah's birthday, man," he said, like I was the one being crazy. "You didn't see the texts?" "What texts?" I said, already knowing the answer. He shrugged. "Must have been a glitch or something. Anyway, listen. I figured it made more sense to combine the parties. The kids are basically the same age and Dylan loves Elijah, right? So, I just pivoted a little." "Pivoted? You used my money to throw a party for your kid." He looked around, lowering his voice. "Hey, don't make this weird, okay? It's a shared experience, like co-hosted. And honestly, Elijah deserves something nice. He's been having a tough time lately. What with Tanya getting laid off and all." I swear I blacked out for a second. This wasn't some tiny miscommunication. He had taken my $10,000, lied about the venue, lied about the theme, and hijacked Dylan's party, turning it into a surprise party for his son, and then had the audacity to act like it was some noble gesture. Dylan was standing near the dessert table, his little smile slowly fading as he looked around. The music, the decorations, none of it matched what we talked about. He looked confused, disappointed. Then he turned to me and asked, "Where's the volcano cake, Dad?" I knelt down and forced the words out. "I don't know, buddy. Let's go find it." I marched back to Jason. "Where's Dylan's cake?" Jason blinked. "There's cake over there. It's a Cars theme. The bakery didn't have time to make two. You promised him a science cake. Bro, cake is cake. Don't be so uptight." I was shaking. "Where are Dylan's friends? His classmates?" "They're here," Jason said, waving vaguely toward the bouncy house. "I think you sent invites, right?" I invited the people I knew. Tanya did the invites. Maybe there was a mix-up. I scanned the crowd. Not a single parent from Dylan's class. Not one. Just Jason's friends, his coworkers, and a bunch of kids Dylan barely knew. I saw our parents, too. My mom was snapping pictures of Elijah with a sparkler candle, and my dad was sipping punch like it was just another Saturday. Nobody looked concerned. I tried to stay calm for Dylan's sake, but it was unraveling fast. The final straw came when Tanya walked over, leaned down to Dylan, my son, and said in this sugary voice, "You don't mind that it's Elijah's party today, right, sweetheart? You'll still get cake." Dylan's lip trembled. That was it. I stood up. "Jason, we're leaving." He blinked. "Dude, don't be dramatic. The kids just got here. There's going to be a magician in like 20 minutes. I don't care if David Blaine shows up riding a dinosaur. We're done." I grabbed Dylan's hand. He didn't protest. He just looked at me with this quiet, confused expression. The kind that says he knew something was wrong but didn't have the words yet. We walked out, past the glitter balloons, past the smiling adults, past the party that was supposed to be his. Once we got in the car, I sat there, hands gripping the wheel. Dylan was quiet. I was trying to figure out what to say, how to spin it, how to salvage what was left of his day. But before I could speak, Dylan said something I'll never forget. "Was I not good enough for my birthday?" Couldn't breathe. I turned around in my seat and looked him in the eyes. No, buddy. You are more than good enough. This was never about you. Uncle Jason made a bad choice and I'm gonna make it right. I promise." He nodded slowly, but he didn't smile, and that crushed me more than anything. The rest of that day was a blur. I took him to his favorite arcade and let him win every round. We got burgers and milkshakes, and I gave him his gift early. A telescope he'd been eyeing for months. He lit up for a while, especially when we looked at the moon together later that night. But something had shifted in him. In me, too. And then came the aftermath. I texted Jason that night. "You stole from me. We need to talk." No reply. The next morning, I emailed him. "I want the receipts. Every dollar. You have 48 hours. Still nothing. By day 3, I started hearing things. A mutual friend told me Jason was telling people I flaked on the party and left early for no reason. That I misunderstood the plan and overreacted. That both boys were supposed to share it, and I walked out for drama. Drama? You know what else I found out? The venue was booked under Tanya's name. The cake was ordered by his coworker. The decorations were rented weeks ago, the day after I gave him the money. Meaning this wasn't a last-minute change. It was always Elijah's party. Jason had planned the whole bait and switch from the start. He used Dylan as a cover to fund a lavish party for his own kid, counting on me being too passive to push back or too family loyal to cause a scene. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated how far a father will go to protect his son. And I was just getting started. After that night, something in me cracked. Not in an explosive way, not in some movie-worthy montage of rage and revenge. No, it was quieter than that. Quieter and deeper, like a hairline fracture in a foundation. You can't see it from the outside, but the weight of it starts to shift everything. I stopped talking to Jason. For the first week, it was easy. I told myself I just needed space. That once I cooled off, we'd talk it out, maybe scream it out, and things would settle. But every time I opened my phone and saw the pictures people had posted from Elijah's party, with Dylan's name nowhere in sight, something twisted in my chest. Tanya had uploaded a full album on Facebook titled Elijah's Epic Eighth. Thanks, Uncle Ryan, for sponsoring. Sponsoring. Like I was some faceless donor. I didn't even know what to do with that. My mom, bless her for trying, called me 2 days later. "Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but can't you just let it go? Jason didn't mean any harm." Didn't mean harm? He stole from me, I said. He humiliated Dylan. He's family, she said, like that was supposed to fix it. He just got a little overwhelmed. Tanya's been out of work and Elijah's had a tough year. Maybe Jason thought he could combine things to make everyone happy. Dylan wasn't happy. She sighed. Well, maybe Dylan just didn't understand. That broke something in me even more. It was like the adults in my life had all agreed to live in a shared delusion that if we all smiled hard enough and kept saying, "It's fine," the cracks wouldn't show. But I couldn't live in that house of denial anymore. Not with Dylan asking me every night if we'd ever do his party again. And not when I had to explain to his teacher why half the class had no idea they were even invited. Jason never sent the receipts. Never replied to the email. Never called back. But he did post a selfie the following week, grinning with Elijah and Tanya at a water park resort. The caption read, "When hard work pays off, treat your family. They deserve it." That was when the silence stopped feeling like self-care and started to feel like cowardice. But at the same time, I wasn't okay. I felt humiliated and guilty, not just about the money, but about Dylan. About the look in his eyes when the cake wasn't for him. About the fact that I let someone take advantage of me again. I've always been the forgiving one, the fixer, the quiet one, the guy who keeps the peace because someone has to. But keeping the peace at the expense of your own kid? That's not peace. That's surrender. Still, I didn't rush to get revenge. I didn't blast Jason online. I didn't show up to his place demanding cash. No, I went quiet. And in that quiet, something started to shift. The fall didn't happen all at once. It crept up on me. Work got harder. I was in sales, and when your job is to sound upbeat and persuasive on calls while your stomach's in knots, well, it doesn't go great. I missed 2 deals in a row. My boss called me into his office and asked if everything was okay. I lied, said I was just tired, that I needed to recharge. But really, I was drained, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. I didn't trust anyone. I started questioning everything. The way I give, the people I trust, even how I parent. I started replaying old memories with Jason in a new light. The way he borrowed my car in college and returned it with a cracked bumper. The time he asked for help paying Tanya's vet bill and then posted a video from a bar that night. I realized it had always been this way. I just didn't want to admit it. One night, after Dylan fell asleep, I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch flipping through old pictures. There was one from Dylan's 5th birthday. We were in the backyard, balloons tied to the fence, a dinosaur cake from a grocery store, and Dylan was wearing this paper crown he made in school. He looked so happy, the kind of happy you don't fake. No big venue, no giant banner, just me, him, and people who actually cared. I stared at that photo for a long time, and then I opened my laptop. If Jason wasn't going to give me receipts, I'd build the paper trail myself. I started digging texts, emails, screenshots of our conversations, bank transfers, my Venmo history. I remember the exact day I gave him the $10,000. It was a direct wire. I pulled the statement. There it was, labeled Birthday Dylan. I found messages where he explicitly said he was handling Dylan's party. Promises in writing, mentions of the Natural History Museum, the works. Then I called the museum. The woman on the phone was polite but confused. No, sir, we didn't have any birthday bookings under the name Jason or Elijah or Ryan for that date. In fact, that weekend was reserved for a private fundraiser. So he never even tried. I opened a spreadsheet. Line by line, I started recording everything. The transfer, the promised services, the actual outcome. I even messaged a few parents from Dylan's class to ask if they'd ever received an invite. Most of them hadn't. A few said they got something from Tanya's email, but it mentioned Elijah, not Dylan. So they assumed it was a different party. I started to realize this wasn't just a betrayal. It was fraud. Maybe not criminal, maybe not jail-worthy, but enough to make a small claims judge raise an eyebrow. Enough to call a lawyer, not to sue yet, but to understand what my options were. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Dylan, not even my friends. I just worked quietly, calmly, and somewhere in that quiet rage, I started rebuilding. Work got better. I stopped faking cheeriness and started getting real. When a colleague asked how I was doing, I actually told her. Not the details, just that I'd had a family betrayal and I was working through it. She didn't flinch, just nodded and said, "Yeah, been there." We ended up having coffee. Nothing romantic, just connection, real talk. Dylan and I started spending more quality time together. No big events, just hikes, movie nights. I let him help me cook dinner, even if it meant waiting 30 minutes longer and burning the rice half the time. I listened more. And one night, while we were lying on the grass looking at the stars through his telescope, he said something that made my heart break in a good way. "I like this birthday better," he said. "The one after the fake one." I smiled. Yeah, it's just us. It wasn't just us, though. Not anymore. See, the more I rebuilt my own life, the more I noticed how Jason's life started to fray. He kept up the social media facade, of course. Fancy captions, new hashtags, flexing designer clothes that he definitely hadn't bought himself. But cracks were showing. Tanya got a new job and moved to another city. Jason didn't follow. Then a friend of mine, a wedding planner, messaged me out of the blue. "Hey, weird question. Did your brother book a venue using your name?" I stared at my screen. "What venue?" I asked. She sent a screenshot. Jason had apparently name-dropped me to get a discount on a banquet hall for a family reunion. Claimed I'd worked with them before, vouched for him. He'd even used my old company email in the forms. I called the venue myself. Sure enough, it was booked under my name with his phone number and a deposit paid in cash. That was it. That was the moment I stopped being quiet. But I didn't yell. I didn't confront. I just smiled, because I realized something. Jason didn't just think he could take from me. He needed me. My name, my reputation, my consistency. He built his chaos on the foundation of my stability. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to take that foundation back. So I kept building. Building my case, building my network, building his downfall. And when the moment finally came to strike, I'd do it in a way he'd never forget. But we'll get there. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I wasn't planning on a banquet. I was planning a 5-course meal with a wine pairing and a dessert menu Jason wouldn't see coming. By now, I had everything I needed to crush him legally. Emails, texts, bank transfers, screenshots, a witness list, and even voice memos from a few parents confirming they'd never been invited to Dylan's birthday. But I didn't want to just win in court. That would have been too clean, too quick. Jason had humiliated my son. He made Dylan question if he even deserved his own birthday. This wasn't about just getting my money back. This was about making sure Jason learned, finally, that actions have consequences, that being the golden boy with a slick smile doesn't shield you forever. And I wasn't going to break the rules to do it. I was going to beat him at the rules. I wanted him to choke on every corner he'd cut. I wanted the walls he leaned on to collapse. Not because I pushed them, but because he built them out of straw. So, step 1. Start quietly burning his bridges. I started with vendors. Jason had always loved to brag about his connections. It's how he got most of his discounts on party venues, equipment rentals, catering. What people didn't know was that those connections usually came through me. Years ago, I worked in event sales. I still knew people in the industry. One of my old colleagues, Marissa, ran a vendor coordination agency, the kind that high-end planners use to source venues, permits, and logistics. I gave her a call. "Hey, Mar," I said casually. "You ever work with a guy named Jason Maddox?" Silence for a beat. Then, "Ryan, please tell me he's not family." "Unfortunately, he is." She groaned. "He's been using your name. Said you referred him. We cut him a deal last month on a lighting package. It was a mess. Late payments, last-minute changes, and he tried to upsell the DJ without telling us. Mind if I clear that up for you?" So I did. I explained everything calmly, factually. She didn't just believe me. She was furious. She told me Jason had done this to 2 other vendors on her list as well, claimed he was tight with me and used that to bypass standard contracts and negotiate family discounts. And that's when I saw my opening. "Would you be open to sending a vendor-wide memo?" I asked. "Just letting people know he doesn't represent me, or anyone else for that matter." She didn't hesitate. Done. Within a week, Jason's name was flagged in 3 internal vendor systems. His deposit refunds were delayed due to verification. His inquiries went ignored. His discounts vanished. Tanya's old event planner friend, who had helped him with Elijah's party, messaged me privately and said, "Thank you. He name-dropped you to us, too. We would have never guessed." That was just phase 1. Phase 2 required a little more creativity. See, Jason had always leaned on social clout. He loved being seen as the fun dad, the guy who threw the best parties, who made things happen. But his image was fragile. He needed that facade like a shark needs motion. If he stopped performing, he'd drown. So, I decided to hit him where it hurt, his public persona. I created a new Instagram account. Anonymous, no followers, no posts, and followed all the event pages he'd tagged from Elijah's party. Then I messaged each one with a simple inquiry. "Hey, curious why you helped promote a party that was funded under false pretenses? Heard the dad stole the money meant for his nephew's birthday and used it for his own kid. Seems off." I didn't accuse. I asked just enough to plant doubt. A few didn't respond, but one, a kids' party entertainer with 80K followers, replied, "Wait, are you talking about Jason? He hired me for that party, paid in cash. Said it was a combo birthday, but only Elijah's name was on everything." I felt weird about it. I didn't push. I just thanked them and moved on. A few days later, their post about Elijah's party was quietly taken down. Another domino. Then came phase 3, the party. No, not another fake shared party. A real one for Dylan on his own terms. I'd already missed his birthday, and I wasn't about to let that be the final word. But I didn't want to just throw a make-up party. I wanted to flip the narrative, reclaim the story. Dylan deserved to feel like he was worth the celebration. So I started planning quietly and carefully. I didn't tell Dylan at first, just told him we were going to do something cool soon. A surprise, but his surprise, not someone else's hijack. I reached out to the Natural History Museum again. Turns out they had a last-minute cancellation for a Saturday afternoon 3 weeks out. It wasn't cheap, but I wasn't thinking about cheap. I was thinking about right. I booked it. Then I called in every favor I had. A former client of mine ran a mobile science lab for schools. They agreed to bring their volcano experiment station and Dino dig kit. Another buddy of mine was a children's illustrator. He offered to do personalized caricatures of every kid in spacesuits. I hired a baker who specialized in custom cakes, and together we designed a 4-tiered masterpiece. Half galaxy, half prehistoric jungle, with an erupting chocolate lava center and tiny edible astronauts scaling the sides. But this time, I didn't give a dime to anyone else to plan it. I kept control. I made sure every kid in Dylan's class got a proper invite with his name, his theme, his photo. I even called their parents directly to explain what had happened without trashing Jason. Most of them responded with sympathy. I was wondering why the invite said Elijah, one mom said. We were confused. Glad you're doing this. Another dad told me, Dylan deserves his own day. And then I got an idea. It started as a joke, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt perfect. What if I scheduled Dylan's party on the same day as Elijah's actual birthday? It just so happened that Elijah's real birthday, not the fake surprise party date, was coming up. Jason usually throws something big for it, always makes a scene. But now he was ghosted by vendors. No favors, no discounts, no network. So, I booked Dylan's party for the exact same day. And I invited everyone. All of Dylan's classmates, all of the extended family, all of Jason's mutual connections, the ones who used to believe his stories. But here's the twist. I didn't tell anyone it was the same day. I just let the invitations speak for themselves. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Jason. Not in a stalkerish way, just through mutual circles. He tried to book a venue, got denied. Tried to rent a bouncy castle, vendor bailed. Someone told me he was scrambling to find an alternate plan. Hosting something at a park maybe? Or a last-minute pizza party. It didn't matter because I was already several steps ahead. I wasn't just setting the stage for revenge. I was building a new narrative. One where Dylan wasn't the afterthought. He was the main character. And Jason, he was about to find out what it feels like to be invisible. The night before the party, Dylan found me taping together gift bags with tiny astronaut helmets on top. He watched me for a minute, then said, Is this for the surprise? I smiled. Yeah, but this time, the surprise is yours. He grinned. Will there be lava cake? Chocolate lava? I nodded. And an edible T-Rex. He gasped and threw his arms around me. Thanks, Dad. That moment, that hug. That was when I knew this wasn't just about getting even. It was about showing my son that when people betray you, you don't shrink. You rise, and you make the world remember exactly who you are. But the next day, that's when everything came crashing down for Jason. And I haven't even told you the best part yet. The morning of Dylan's real birthday party. Not the decoy, not the lie, the real one, the one he earned and deserved, started off bright and quiet. The sky was this soft kind of blue that made everything feel intentional, like even the weather was rooting for him. I woke up before he did, made pancakes with chocolate chip stars, sliced strawberries into little rocket shapes. Nothing fancy, just thoughtful. That's what I'd learned through all this. Kids don't need grand, they need real. By the time we got to the museum, the staff was already setting up. Tablecloths printed with constellations, planet-shaped balloons tied to dino footprints leading toward the main exhibit hall. The science team had their stations ready. DIY volcanoes, meteorite touch samples, and even a build-your-own asteroid kit. Dylan couldn't stop bouncing on his heels. And the cake, it stole the show. For towering tiers, rotating slowly on a custom stand. The top half was a night sky filled with sugar stars and astronauts. The bottom was a dense jungle of ferns, raptors, and a tiny molten volcano that actually oozed chocolate when tapped. Dylan stared at it like it was a spaceship. Is this all for me? He whispered. All of it? I said, kneeling beside him. Every single part. By noon, kids were arriving in waves. Classmates, neighbors, even 2 cousins from my ex's side. Every one of them was holding a gift and calling his name. And Dylan, he beamed. Not smiled, beamed. He didn't know yet what I'd done behind the scenes. To him, this was just magic. To me, it was reclamation. Around 12:30, while kids were decorating astronaut helmets and chasing flying drones shaped like pterosaurs, I stepped away to check my phone. I had one unread message from a mutual friend of Jason's. Bro, What the heck is going on? Where is everybody? I didn't reply. Apparently, Jason's party, a hastily thrown-together barbecue at a local park, was starting to unravel fast. Turns out, when you lie to people for long enough, they stop showing up. The parents Jason had expected to attend had all RSVP'd to my event. He hadn't even realized Dylan's party was on Elijah's actual birthday until it was too late. Most of them hadn't even told him they were going elsewhere. They just went. From what I heard later, the setup was rough. No decorations, no show, no cake. At first, he'd forgotten to pick it up and had to sprint to a grocery store. Tanya didn't come. Apparently, she'd caught wind of what he did with the $10,000 and decided she'd had enough. She and Elijah had been on shaky terms with Jason since she moved back in with her sister. This was the last straw. But the real blow was the entertainment. Jason had apparently bragged that the same magician from Elijah's last party was going to be there again. Except, well, that magician was at my party because I'd hired him and paid him properly in advance with a contract. So around 1:45, right after Dylan finished building a baking soda rocket that launched 5 feet into the air, the magician appeared in full astronaut gear, hovering beside the kids with smoke effects and an animatronic alien puppet. The screams of excitement were so loud I could barely hear the music anymore. That was the moment I got the second message from Jason. Seriously? You booked him? You planned this on today? I didn't respond to that one either because the truth is, I didn't plan it on Elijah's birthday. Elijah's birthday just happened to fall on the day the museum became available. Jason didn't have a monopoly on calendars. He just assumed I'd play small, that I wouldn't make a move. But I did. And now he was sitting on a public park bench next to melting hot dogs and folding chairs while his son asked why none of his friends came. I should have felt guilty, but I didn't, because Jason had done that to himself. He was the one who betrayed us. He was the one who used his own son to steal from mine. This wasn't revenge. This was balance. I waited until the party wound down, after Dylan had opened his gifts, after the second round of cake, after the museum staff handed him a framed photo of him wearing his little white lab coat, holding a plastic beaker like a scientist in training. He grinned at me and said, "Can we do this every year?" "You bet." Then, and only then, did I walk out to the front of the museum and call Jason. He answered immediately. "You've got to be kidding me, Ryan." I said nothing. "Do you realize what you did? You made me look like a clown." I kept my voice calm. "You didn't need any help with that. You sabotaged Elijah's birthday." "No," I said evenly. "You sabotaged Dylan's. I just made sure he got it back." He huffed. "I had to explain to my son why his party was empty, why people were posting pictures from a museum party across town. You manipulated people." I laughed, the kind of slow, tired laugh you let out when someone still doesn't get it. "I didn't manipulate anyone, Jason. I sent out honest invitations. I didn't lie. I didn't bait and switch. I didn't throw a surprise party for my kid using your money and then pretend we were co-hosting." He tried to interrupt, but I cut him off. "You've coasted your entire life on charm and shortcuts. You think because people don't confront you, they don't see you. But they do. They all do. And they're done. You're not better than me, Ryan," he spat. "I don't need to be better than you," I said. "I just need to be better for Dylan. And I am." Silence. Then he snapped. "I want that 10 grand back." I smiled. "Great. I'll see you in court." And I meant it, because 3 days later I filed a small claims suit. I had the documentation, the bank transfer, the texts, the vendor testimony, the signed email from the museum proving he never booked it, the statement from a parent saying Jason misled them about whose party it was. My lawyer told me it was one of the cleanest misuse of funds cases he'd ever seen. Jason tried to fight it, said it was a gift, not an agreement. But the paper trail didn't lie, especially the part where he promised a science-themed event for Dylan and delivered a Fortnite cake with Elijah's name on it instead. The judge awarded me $9,650, minus some minor expenses Jason proved he'd covered. He didn't even show up to the final hearing. I garnished it from his tax return 6 months later. Last I heard, Jason's moved back in with our parents. His little circle of vendors dried up. The events business he claimed he was launching folded before it started. Tanya is not returning his calls. Elijah still spends time with him, but I noticed something when they came to a school event a few weeks later. Elijah didn't run to his dad. He ran to Dylan. And Dylan? He handed him a slice of leftover birthday cake from our freezer, the one shaped like Saturn. "You can have the rings," he said. Jason just watched from a few feet away, hands in his pockets, trying not to look like he cared. And me? I stood behind my son, proud and calm, because for once, I didn't need to fix anything. It was already done. And Dylan finally knew the truth. He was never the afterthought. He was the whole story. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My name's Daniel. I'm 31. And if you asked anyone in my family to describe me, you'd probably get a polite nod followed by a whispered, "He's around sometimes." That's fine. I've always been the quiet one, the one who moved out early, kept to myself, built a business, and never made a scene. I didn't go to every family gathering. I wasn't in the group chats 24/7, and I didn't plaster my life all over Facebook like my cousins did. But when things broke, cars, relationships, budgets, my name suddenly popped up again because I always helped quietly. I never rubbed it in. I just paid the bill, covered the emergency, or sent the check. It was easier than the drama. And I told myself I was doing it for the people I cared about, even if they barely seemed to care about me back. That's why when my cousin Sophie announced her wedding, I didn't expect an invite at first. We weren't close growing up. She was loud, popular, always center stage. I was the guy with the headphones in the corner at Thanksgiving. But she invited me, and not only that, she asked to talk the week after the engagement. She came to my place, all bright-eyed, talking about venues and themes and how expensive weddings are these days. Her fiancé, Leo, stood beside her, looking slightly uncomfortable, while she walked me through what was clearly a rehearsed pitch. They weren't asking for money directly, of course. They just wondered if I knew anyone who could help or had advice on vendors. But I got the hint. I always get the hint. I told her I'd think about it, and I did. I sat on it for a few days, then called a few people I trusted. The florist I'd worked with on a company event, the DJ I hired for a fundraiser. I even had contacts at a nice boutique venue that owed me a favor. I negotiated quietly, pulled strings, and made sure every piece of her dream wedding, the flowers, the music, the lighting, even the bar, was taken care of. I paid the deposits anonymously through my LLC. No one needed to know. I didn't want a pat on the back or a shout-out during speeches. I just wanted to give her a beautiful day because, in some strange way, that's always been how I felt closest to family. By showing up in ways they never saw coming. The wedding was this past spring, late April. Cherry blossoms and lanterns. Sophie had picked a light blush theme, everything soft and romantic. I showed up in a charcoal gray suit, quiet as always. I wasn't seated at the front tables. They had me with some extended relatives I barely knew, and that was fine. I didn't mind. I watched as Sophie walked down the aisle, watched Leo tear up, watched everyone cheer during the kiss. And for a while, I let myself think this was going to be a good night. That maybe I didn't need to be seen to matter. That maybe it was enough just to contribute in silence. Then came the dinner. Long tables, flickering candles, soft jazz playing in the background. I was halfway through my plate of salmon when I caught my mom's voice carrying over the music. She was at the head table, of course. Our family always finds a way to stay close to the spotlight, and she was leaned in close, speaking to Leo's parents, loud enough that I could hear every word from 3 tables away. "Oh, that one," she said, nodding toward me with her wine glass. "That's Daniel, the disappointment. We don't talk about him unless we need money." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Leo's mom let out a polite laugh. My aunt, sitting nearby, actually giggled and sipped her drink. And my sister, perfect Emily with the Pinterest family, the photogenic husband, and the matching outfits for every occasion, just smirked like it was an inside joke she'd heard 1,000 times. No one looked uncomfortable. No one corrected her, and no one thought I'd heard. I sat there completely still, staring at the white tablecloth as something hot rose in my chest. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was more like confirmation of everything I'd always quietly feared. That to them, I wasn't family. I was a resource. I looked around the room. The twinkling lights, the hanging roses, the perfect dance floor setup. All of it had come together seamlessly. All of it because of me. And yet here I was, invisible. Worse than invisible. Punchline. My hand gripped the fork tighter. I should have let it go, right? Just finished the meal, said my polite goodbyes, and left like always. Let them talk, let them laugh. Who cares? But something shifted in me. Something old and tired and done. I got up. I didn't storm. I didn't make a scene. Not yet. I just walked calmly toward the back hallway where the venue manager was stationed with his clipboard. His name was Andre, a tall guy in a vest with a Bluetooth earpiece. We'd been in touch for weeks during the planning. I'd signed every agreement, paid every invoice. Hey Andre, I said quietly, you still have that payment slip I gave you for final clearance? He looked up, surprised to see me. Yeah, of course. Everything's squared away. What? I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a different slip, the one I'd prepared a week ago, just in case. A cancellation notice. Signed, dated, with instructions to halt final payment if presented before 9 p.m. Use this one instead. He blinked. You serious? Very. He hesitated. You sure you want to do this mid-event? I smiled for the first time that night. Oh, I think the timing is perfect. I turned around and walked back into the reception hall. The DJ had just switched to a dance mix and the floor was filling up. Sophie and Leo were spinning under the lights, her dress twirling, guests clapping. My mom was still near the head table, glass in hand. My sister had moved to the bar where she was chatting with one of Leo's friends. Everyone looked blissfully unaware. I made my way toward the mic stand, positioned by the stage just next to the cake. The best man had finished his speech about 15 minutes earlier, so the mic was still hot, waiting for the next moment. I stepped up, adjusted the height, and tapped twice. The room didn't go silent right away. Took a second, then people turned. Conversations paused. Even the DJ faded the track down. All eyes slowly shifted toward me. The guy in the back, the quiet one, the disappointment, cleared my throat. Hi, I said, calm and steady. I just want to say thank you all for coming tonight. It's been a beautiful evening. Really. Sophie stopped dancing. Leo turned to look at me. My mom furrowed her brows, tilting her head like she couldn't quite believe what I was doing. I know most of you don't know me that well, I continued, but I'm Daniel, the cousin, the one they apparently only mention when they need money. A few people laughed awkwardly. My aunt shifted in her seat. But that's okay, I said, because I like helping. I do. I like knowing that people can have what they want without worrying about how it all comes together. So when Sophie said this wedding was too expensive, I stepped in quietly. I covered the flowers, the lighting, the open bar, the DJ, even the deposit on this gorgeous venue. The silence now was absolute. But I also made sure the final payment wasn't processed until tonight, just in case anything changed. I reached into my coat again and held up a folded slip. This, I said, is the change. Then I stepped down, walked past the stunned faces, and handed the paper to Andre. Behind me, the mic squeaked. The music didn't start up again, and before I even hit the front door, I heard someone shout my name. But I didn't turn around. Not yet, because what came next, what happened once they realized what I'd just done, was the part I'd been waiting for all my life. The rain had started. Not a storm. Not yet. Just a slow, steady drizzle. The kind that soaks through suit fabric and makes streetlights shimmer. I stepped out beneath the canopy and stood for a moment on the front patio of the venue, listening. Behind me, the muffled chaos had begun. Voices rising. A chair scraping harshly against the floor. A burst of someone shouting, "Wait! What do you mean canceled?" I didn't smile. Not yet. I was calm, but my heart was pounding, steady and cold. I turned my phone screen face down in my pocket. No pictures, no recording. This wasn't for social media. This was personal. The heavy doors behind me creaked open, and I heard heels click fast on the stone path. Sophie's voice, sharp, panicked, cut through the rain. "Daniel," she called. "Wait, can we talk?" I didn't move. I waited until she was beside me. Her dress bunched at her knees to keep it from dragging through a puddle. Her hair, done in curls and pearls, was starting to frizz at the edges. "What did you do?" she snapped, voice low but dangerous. I turned slowly and looked her in the eye. "I withdrew my gift." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "What? You can't just... This is my wedding." "I know," I said quietly. "And I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it so badly to be enough." Sophie's mouth opened, but I kept going. But then I heard. "Mom," I said. I heard what she said. That I'm a disappointment. That I don't count. That I'm only family when my name's on the invoice. She blinked rapidly, mascara already smudging. "She didn't mean that. She said she was just being." "Sophie," I interrupted, my voice firmer now. "You sat at that table and laughed. You let her say it. You didn't even flinch." She crossed her arms. "I was trying not to make a scene. It's my wedding day. And I was trying to do something kind," I said. "But you don't get to take my money and then pretend I don't exist." She bit her lip. Her hands shook. "But you already paid." "No," I said. "I paid the deposit, not the balance." The contract was clear. No final payment. No continued services after 9 p.m. And it's 8:52. She looked past me toward the glass doors where lights flickered inside. "You ruined this. You blew up my wedding." "No," I said, taking a step back into the rain. "Your words did." That's when the second wave hit. Emily, my sister, was next out the door, holding her phone in one hand, already typing furiously into the family group chat. No doubt her husband trailed behind, silent as ever, probably wondering if he was supposed to intervene. Behind them came Mom, moving slower, more deliberate, like she'd rehearsed whatever she was about to say. "Daniel," Mom said, chin lifted. "What kind of childish tantrum is this?" I looked at her. "No tantrum," I said. "Just a receipt. We've been nothing but supportive." I laughed, short and flat. "Supportive? I paid off Emily's car loan last year and you told people she did it herself. I covered your medical deductible in February and you told your church friends it was a government grant. You use me like a credit card and call it love." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic. You chose to help." "I did, and I don't regret helping. I regret thinking it would make me matter to you." She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. "You think I'm a disappointment? That I'm not worth talking about unless I'm holding the checkbook? Fine. Then talk about this. Figure out how to fix tonight without me." And then the doors behind them opened wide. Andre stood there, calm but tense, holding a clipboard and gesturing to the DJ who had already unplugged his laptop. The room behind them was a buzz of confusion. Guests whispering, waiters slowing down service, some already beginning to clear plates. And Sophie turned back toward the building like she was about to sprint back in and start shouting. Instead, she spun on me again, hands shaking. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is going to be?" she hissed. I tilted my head. "Good." Her mouth opened again, but my sister cut in first. "You're just jealous," Emily sneered. "Always have been." That caught me off guard. I actually laughed. "Jealous of what?" "Being part of a family that only pretends I exist when there's a bill to pay." "You ruined this night," Emily shouted. "No," I said again. "You did. You just didn't realize the person you insulted was the one holding it all together." The rain picked up a little. I watched as Mom grabbed Emily's arm and tried to corral them both back inside, muttering about damage control. Sophie lingered a moment longer, and her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before. Not rage, not sadness, just fear. Not fear of me, fear of being exposed, of people finding out the wedding wasn't just family funded. It was Daniel funded. And now, very suddenly, it wasn't. I turned and walked down the steps toward the gravel drive, ignoring the rising voices behind me. As I reached my car, a modest black sedan, I parked away from the limos. I saw my phone light up, 17 missed messages. 3 calls. The group chat was blowing up. I ignored them. Then, just as I opened my car door, a new name appeared on the screen. Leo. I paused. Of all the people, he was the only one who hadn't spoken yet. I stared at the call for a moment and then picked up. But before I say what happened next, before I tell you what Leo said and how that one conversation turned this entire mess upside down, I need you to understand what I heard in his voice the second I answered. Because it wasn't panic, it wasn't anger. It was regret. And that changed everything. I sat in the driver's seat, one hand on the door, the rain drumming a steady rhythm across the windshield. I wasn't cold, but I was shaking, that deep, hollow tremble that comes when something inside you finally snaps after holding tension for far too long. The phone still buzzed softly in my hand. Leo still calling. I answered with a flat, quiet, yeah. There was silence for a second. No shouting, no scolding, just static and breathing. Then he said, I didn't know. I didn't respond. I swear to you, Daniel, he said, voice low but steady. I didn't know it was you. Sophie said the venue gave them a huge discount. I thought maybe it was just some family friend hookup, or I didn't know you paid for everything. I leaned my head back against the seat and stared at the ceiling. I believed him. That was the worst part. I believed every word. Leo had always seemed decent. A little passive, sure, but not malicious, not manipulative, and certainly not like the rest of my family, which is probably why, in hindsight, I was okay helping him marry into it. He kept talking. And what your mom said, God man, I heard it too. I was behind the bar when she said it. I looked over at you and saw you just freeze. I swallowed. So, you heard it. And you still stood up and gave your little speech about how every part of this wedding was made possible by the love of both our families. He hesitated. I panicked. I almost laughed. That seems to be a theme. There was silence on the line again. Then he said something I didn't expect. She's not who I thought she was. That hit harder than anything else. She was great when it was just the two of us, he said quickly. But this wedding, your mom, your sister, all of it, it's like the minute the planning started, she turned into someone I didn't recognize. Controlling, shallow, obsessed with appearances. I thought she was just stressed. But now, he trailed off. I exhaled slowly. You chose her, Leo. I know, he said. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I sat upright. What? I need to tell you something. And I need you to come back for it. I narrowed my eyes. Come back to the wedding? No, he said. Come back inside just for a minute. Please. Before everything else unravels. Leo, I'm not asking you to fix anything, he said quickly. I'm not asking you to pay for anything. I'm asking you to hear something from me, in front of everyone. I gripped the steering wheel. My heart was pounding again, harder this time. I know I don't have the right, he continued. But if you ever cared at all, even a little, just give me 5 minutes. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there feeling the heat from the vents, the mist on the windows, the tension building all over again. What could he possibly say? What could possibly make this worth walking back into that room after the smirks, the lies, the mockery? And yet, there was something in his voice. Not desperation, not manipulation. Conviction. So, I killed the engine, grabbed my coat, and stepped back out into the rain. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. The lights were still on, but dimmer now, like someone had turned down the brightness to reflect the awkward tension hanging in the air. The DJ was gone. The bar was half-shuttered. Waitstaff were nervously collecting half-finished drinks and uneaten cake slices. Guests whispered in corners. A few people were already leaving, murmuring about refunds and, what a shame, really. I walked in through the side entrance, unnoticed at first. Then Leo saw me. He was on the stage, mic in hand, suit slightly damp, tie loosened like he'd just been in a fight with it. He met my eyes and gave me the faintest nod. Okay, he said into the mic. I know tonight didn't go the way any of us expected. And before anyone else leaves, I need to say something. People turned. Conversation stopped. My mom, near the front with a napkin in her hand, froze mid-whisper. Leo continued. I was going to give a speech about how grateful I am for both of our families, how much support we had, how loved we felt. But I'm not going to lie to all of you anymore. Sophie appeared from the hallway then, makeup smeared, face red. She stopped dead when she saw me in the back. Her eyes flicked between me and Leo, then to the mic. Tonight happened because one person in this room made it happen, Leo said. He paid for the flowers, the DJ, the lights, the bar, the venue, and he didn't do it for praise. He did it quietly without asking for credit. That person is Daniel. All eyes turned to me, some shocked, some confused. And I found out, he said. Not because he bragged, but because someone else made it really, really clear he wasn't appreciated. He looked directly at my mom. And I think that's disgusting. A ripple moved through the room. Leo didn't flinch. I've spent the last year thinking I was marrying into a family that valued kindness, loyalty, and love. But what I saw tonight, what I heard, was entitlement, mockery, and a complete lack of respect for the person who literally made this night possible. He looked back at me. Daniel, I know you didn't do this for attention. I know you're probably halfway out the door already. But if you can hear me, I'm sorry. Sophie shot forward, grabbing his arm. What are you doing? Leo shrugged her off. What I should have done the second I heard your mother laugh at him. She hissed something at him, too low for me to hear. He didn't blink. I still care about you, he said, voice shaking slightly. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't see what I saw. And I'm not going to start my marriage by lying to the one person who's never asked for anything in return. He turned back to the mic. I'll be outside, he said. I think I need some air. And with that, he set the mic down and walked straight toward me. I didn't move. He passed guests staring mouth agape. My aunt covered her face. My mom stood stock-still, pale. My sister looked like she'd just witnessed a car crash in slow motion. And when Leo reached me, he said quietly, "Let's go." I followed him out the side door, back into the rain. He didn't say anything for a while. Neither did I. And then, as we stood beneath the overhang, the last of the wedding music echoing faintly behind us, Leo turned and said something that made me freeze all over again. You might want to come by tomorrow morning, he said. I think there's something you should see. And it's not the wedding photos. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? But he just gave me a look. The kind that says everything and nothing at once, and then walked off toward the parking lot, leaving me alone again in the drizzle. Whatever it wasn't over. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. I drove home in silence, the kind that fills your head with echoes. My phone kept buzzing. Missed calls, angry texts from my mother, Emily, even Sophie. Most weren't worth reading. One from Sophie just said, "You're cruel." Another from Mom read, "You humiliated us." The only one that gave me pause came from Leo right before midnight. 9 a.m. Her parents' house. Come alone. So I did. I showed up in jeans and a plain hoodie. No suit, no performance. The house wasn't far, big, white trimmed, paid off from 2 generations of quiet inheritance. I recognized the cars in the driveway. Her parents, her older brother's Tesla, even my sister's SUV parked across the curb. I rang the bell once. Leo answered. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept either, but his eyes were clear, focused. No hesitation. "She's in the living room," he said, stepping aside. "They all are." I followed him through the hallway and into the open living room where everyone turned to stare at me like I was the unwanted guest who'd wandered in during a funeral. The air was thick, the kind of tension that makes you feel like every breath might crack the walls. Sophie was sitting on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, tear tracks still faint on her cheeks. Her parents sat beside her, stiff and indignant. My sister Emily leaned against the wall near the fireplace, scrolling through her phone like none of this applied to her. My mother, of course, sat center stage, straight-backed in an armchair like she was running a board meeting. No one said anything, so Leo spoke. "I wanted you all here because I needed to say this once out loud, without spin, without pretending everything's fine." He looked at Sophie, then at her parents. "I can't marry into this." Her mother gasped. Her father stood. "Excuse me?" Leo raised a hand. I love Sophie, or I did. But this family, this toxicity, the way you treat Daniel, the only person in this room who's done anything selfless, is disgusting. You expect people to give without thanks, take without guilt, and then mock them behind their backs. Sophie's voice cracked. So what? You're breaking up with me? I'm ending an engagement based on lies and entitlement, Leo said. I won't build a life on that. Her father started shouting. Her mother tried to talk over him. Emily looked up, finally, smirked, and went back to scrolling. Then my mom stood. Daniel, she said, trying for calm. This has gone far enough. You've made your point. No, I said, stepping forward. I haven't. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folder. I handed it to Leo, who opened it without hesitation. Inside were copies of every payment I'd made toward the wedding. Vendor contracts, bank transfers, timestamps, receipts. I'd printed them all, labeled them, annotated with the names of people who signed each agreement. I nodded at Leo. Give that to your lawyer if they try to spin the story. I waived all refunds. The vendors got paid. What I didn't pay for, they didn't receive. End of story. Leo gave me a firm nod, then looked back at the room. There's one more thing, I said. I turned to my mother. You wanted a family that didn't embarrass you, that didn't disappoint you, that didn't ask for anything. Well, congratulations. You have won. Because I'm done. She stiffened. Daniel, I've removed myself from the family group chat. I've cut every automatic payment. The house you live in was under my name. As of yesterday morning, the title's been transferred back to me. You have 60 days. Her face paled. Emily gasped. You wouldn't dare, she snapped. I did, I replied. Check your email. It's all there. I looked at Emily next. And your husband's car? The lease was in my name. I canceled it. The dealership picks it up Tuesday. She dropped her phone. Sophie was silent. Her mascara had started running again. Her father kept glancing between me and the papers, then turned to his daughter. You told me the family paid for this, he growled. She said nothing, just pressed her face into her hands. Leo handed the folder back to me, but I shook my head. Keep it. You'll need it. Then I turned to go. As I walked toward the door, I heard my mom whisper, barely loud enough. You think you're better than us now? I didn't even pause. No, I said, pulling open the door. I always was. I just stopped hiding it. And with that, I stepped out into the morning light. The rain had passed, but the ground was still wet, soaked from the night before, from all the damage that couldn't be undone. I didn't look back. I drove away free, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the disappointment. I was the one they'd regret underestimating forever. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Evan. I'm 33, and if there's one lesson life has taught me again and again, it's that being the responsible one comes with a price. I've never been the favorite, never the golden child, never the lovable wild card who causes a scene and somehow gets a pass. I'm the one who has it together, as my mom likes to say, which seems to translate to, I'm the one who pays. Birthdays, graduations, school expenses, vet bills, even the time the heating system broke. I've been the invisible glue holding this tangled family of mine from falling apart for years. My sister, Madison, is 6 years younger than me, beautiful, poised, and terrifyingly good at crying on cue. The kind of girl who can make I didn't ask to be born sound like poetry and still walk away with your credit card and an apology. She got engaged last spring to a guy named Chase, who seems less like a person and more like a mannequin that came to life and learned how to talk about crypto and CrossFit. I never liked him and I never pretended to. But Madison did what Madison always does. Wrapped herself in need and sentimentality. Called me the only one I trust. And then casually mentioned how she'd found the perfect engagement party venue. She just needed someone to front the cost until she and Chase got their finances situated. I should have said no. God, I should have said no. But she sent me a text with a screenshot of her dream dress, some Pinterest board filled with candlelit centerpieces, and a picture of us as kids holding sparklers in our backyard. "You've always been there for me," she wrote. "Please, just help me make this perfect." So I said yes. I paid the deposit for the venue, an obnoxiously expensive garden villa with champagne fountains and a harpist, and gave the manager my card to keep on file for the remaining balance. I wasn't thrilled, but I figured I'd grin and bear it. Keep the peace. Be the dependable one. The day of the party, I showed up with a smile plastered on my face and a Tiffany blue gift bag in hand. Inside was a limited edition pearl and diamond bracelet, something Madison had once mentioned in passing after spotting it on a celebrity's wrist. It was wildly out of budget, but I bought it anyway because I thought maybe, just maybe, for once she'd look at me and see more than a walking ATM. I should have known better. I stepped through the garden archway into the party, expecting maybe a hug or even a thank you. Instead, I barely got 2 steps in before Madison rushed up in her designer heels, gave me the fastest air kiss in history, then leaned in and whispered, "Hey, when we take photos, can you just stand a little to the side? You kind of throw off the aesthetic." I blinked at her, thinking she was joking, but she was already gone, sashaying back toward a photographer and a group of perfectly filtered friends, each of them wearing muted tones that matched the hydrangeas. I was in a navy shirt and charcoal pants, clean, ironed, and objectively appropriate, but apparently not soft enough for the whimsical luxe vibe she was going for. Before I could process that slap in the face, my mom walked by, glanced at my face and muttered, "Try not to make this about you for once, Evan. It's her day." That's her favorite line. I could have been on fire and she'd still hiss that at me for asking where the extinguisher was. She didn't stop walking. I turned around and saw the seating chart. Little gold calligraphy tags delicately pinned to an ornate frame. My name was buried in the lower left corner under Miscellaneous. Table 9. I walked over. Table 9 was 2 toddlers, a couple of folding chairs, one of which had a jagged crack running through the middle, and a high chair with a suspiciously sticky tray. I looked up. Across the lawn was the main table. Cream linens, rose gold flatware, and the important guests. My sister's fiancé's friends, her in-laws, my mom, my aunt, even my younger cousin Ashley had a seat there. But not me. I was the one who paid for the damn thing, and I got seated next to a toddler who screamed whenever someone touched her juice box. Still, I stayed quiet. I stayed calm. I set the gift down on the designated table and poured myself a glass of water from the pitcher meant for the kids' table. I toasted with it when they raised their flutes, watched from the side when Madison and Chase had their first dance to a song so overused it made me wince. I smiled politely when people asked if I was the photographer or the valet or someone's date who bailed. The final straw? It wasn't one big moment. It was the slow, steady drip of being erased, being useful but invisible. I stood behind a hedge near the edge of the tented dance floor, half listening as my mom joked to one of Chase's relatives that she was surprised Evan even showed up. He usually finds some excuse not to be part of things. I'd moved heaven and earth to be there. Rearranged work, canceled a weekend trip, bought the bracelet, paid for the venue, and I'd done it because, for some reason I still can't fully explain, I thought it might matter. So I smiled. I walked over to the venue manager with a calm that even surprised me. I pulled the envelope I'd prepared from my jacket pocket. Inside was a formal cancellation of my card authorization for the remaining party balance, along with a note explaining that I would not be covering any further charges for the event, effective immediately. Legally, they had to inform the party host the moment the authorization was pulled, and I knew they would arrive after the cake was cut, right when it was too late to stop the celebration from unraveling. I left before the chaos started, slipped out the side gate, walked to my car, and sat there for a long moment before turning the key in the ignition. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. I just felt still, like I'd finally stopped swimming against a current that was never going to let me reach the shore. But as I pulled away from the villa and watched the string lights disappear in my rearview mirror, I knew this wasn't over. And neither was I. I didn't check my phone that night. I knew what I'd find. A dozen missed calls, angry voicemails, and maybe 1 or 2 desperate texts trying to guilt me into reversing what I'd done. But I wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. Instead, I drove to a quiet diner on the edge of town, the kind that never closes and doesn't judge you for showing up in dress shoes and a wrinkled shirt at midnight. I sat in a corner booth, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and just breathed. For the first time in a long time, there was no one asking me for anything. No one criticizing the way I dressed, the way I stood, the fact that I wasn't married or that I didn't call enough. Just the hum of a broken jukebox and the occasional clang of dishes in the kitchen. The next morning, I finally looked at my phone. 37 missed calls, 6 voicemails, a barrage of texts from my mom, my sister, even my aunt. It was like watching a wildfire spread. Starting with smoke, building into flames, and finally collapsing into smoldering ash. My mom's first message was sharp. "Evan, what did you do? The venue is saying your card declined and we're responsible for the bill. Call me then, Madison. I cannot believe you would pull something like this on my night. What is wrong with you?" Aunt Deb chimed in too. "Of course. You're lucky your grandmother isn't alive to see this, Evan. She'd be heartbroken." There was even one from Chase which shocked me more than anything else. He'd never bothered to speak to me directly before. "Real mature, man. You embarrassed Maddie in front of everyone. Hope it was worth it." But what got me? What made my stomach twist, not in guilt, but in a slow, simmering rage, was the last message from my mother, sent at 3:14 a.m. "You always find a way to ruin things, just like your father." There it was, that sentence. That little knife she always kept tucked away, ready to twist when I didn't play my part. My father had walked out when I was 12. I remember the slammed door, the shouting, the silence afterward. I remembered being the one to hold Madison when she cried. The one who took up a job bagging groceries at 15 because mom was working double shifts and we needed help. I remembered thinking, I'll be different. I'll stay. I'll show up. And I had. For years. For every scraped knee, every late-night call about a bad date, every school trip they couldn't afford. I'd been the fallback, the fixer, the dependable one. And they had never seen me as anything more than that. I sat there in my apartment reading those messages again and again. And instead of crying or yelling or throwing my phone across the room like a dramatic movie protagonist, I did something far more dangerous. I started planning. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about revenge. Not exactly. It was about freedom. About pulling the plug on this twisted little play we'd all been performing for years, where I was the donor and they were the recipients, and I was supposed to smile and say happy to help, no matter how deep the cut. The first thing I did was call the venue manager. I apologized for any disruption and explained that I had, in fact, canceled the payment and that any future financial questions should be directed to Madison and Chase. He sounded annoyed but understanding. Apparently, he'd seen worse. I thanked him for his professionalism and hung up. Then I logged into my bank accounts and started cutting cords. First, the auto payment for mom's electric bill gone. Then the recurring deposit I'd been sending Madison every month for student loan help, even though she dropped out of grad school a year ago. Gone. I called the accountant I used for my freelance business and told him I wanted to revise the trust I'd set up for family emergencies. As of now, the only person who would have access to those funds in a crisis was me. I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't doing anything out of spite. I was simply choosing me for the first time in a long time. The backlash came fast. That evening, Madison called me finally. Her voice was already high-pitched before I said a word. "Oh, so you're alive now? After you publicly humiliated me in front of everyone I know and left us scrambling to cover a $6,000 bill? I had to put it on my credit card. Evan, do you know how that looks?" I let the silence hang in the air too long. "I thought I threw off your aesthetic," I said calmly. "Didn't want to ruin any more photos." "Oh my God, you're actually going to play the victim?" she hissed. "I asked one thing." "No, you asked 100 things." I cut in, voice flat. "And I gave you all of them. I paid for things you never said thank you for. I showed up when no one else did. I sat at the kids' table and toasted your happiness with lukewarm water, Madison, and all I got in return was a fake smile and a try not to ruin the vibe. You humiliated me long before I ever handed that envelope to the manager." There was a long pause. Then she tried a different tactic. "Mom said you're cutting her off too. She's been crying all day. She's older now, Evan. She needs support." I know she's older, I said. And I know she's been calling me her retirement plan since I was 20. But I'm not her husband. I'm not Dad. And I'm done being punished for the fact that he left. That ended the call. She hung up on me. 2 days later, I got an email from Chase. Not a call. Not even a text. An email titled, "Let's be rational." It was 3 paragraphs of corporate speak, basically trying to convince me to consider the long-term impact of family rifts, and offering a proposal where they'd reimburse me for the bracelet over time if I would just release the hold on the payment. He even attached a spreadsheet with a 6-month payment plan. I didn't reply because that was the moment I realized the tide had shifted. For the first time, they were the ones asking. They were the ones scrambling. And I hadn't even made my next move yet. 3 days passed. No calls, no new emails, just silence. Icy, brittle silence. And for once, it didn't bother me. In fact, it was peaceful. I went about my days as if I hadn't just flipped the entire family dynamic on its head. I did my work. I caught up with an old friend over lunch. I even went to the gym, something I hadn't had time for in months because my free hours were always eaten up by some new crisis Madison couldn't handle or some errand my mom insisted only I could run. And then, on a perfectly ordinary Thursday, I got a call from my Aunt Deb. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Evan," she said in a hushed, urgent tone. "Can you come over to your mom's? It's important." "No," I said simply. "If Mom wants to talk, she can call me." There was a long pause. She's not doing well," Aunt Deb said slowly. "She's been in a mood ever since the party, and now with the utilities." "Utilities?" I repeated. "She didn't tell you?" Deb sounded genuinely surprised. "The electric was shut off yesterday. She thought it was a glitch, but Evan, she's been crying. She says she feels abandoned." I didn't respond right away. I was staring out my window, watching the world move on as if none of this mattered. Finally, I said, "She didn't feel abandoned when she let them put me at the kids' table, or when she compared me to Dad in the worst way possible. She felt just fine then." Aunt Deb was quiet. Then she dropped her voice even lower and said, "Look, between you and me, I think she's finally realizing she pushed too far. Madison, too. This thing has stirred everything up. They're starting to see just how much you actually do or did. Funny how they only start seeing it once the money stops," I replied. She didn't argue. That weekend, I drove to the mountains. No cell reception, no emails, no drama. Just the cold wind in my face and the sound of my boots crunching over dry leaves. I stayed 2 nights in a cabin I'd found online. A simple place with firewood stacked by the door and a dusty old radio that only picked up one station. It was perfect. When I came back down the mountain on Sunday afternoon, I turned my phone on. 33 new messages. Apparently, Madison and Chase had held a post-party dinner that weekend, sort of a follow-up for the guests who couldn't attend the main event. It was supposed to be a small, elegant gathering at a bar downtown. But without me footing the bill, it turned into a potluck at their apartment with folding chairs, a sink full of dishes, a centerpiece made of plastic flowers, and a bottle of Barefoot Rose. One guest posted a picture on Instagram with the caption, "From candlelight elegance to Costco chaos. Who says romance is dead?" Madison wasn't tagged. I scrolled through more messages. One from my cousin Ashley, who'd always kept her distance from the family drama but had apparently reached a tipping point. "Hey Evan, just wanted to say I saw what happened at the party, and I think you were right to walk away. You deserved better. I never said it before, but thanks for always helping when no one else would. Just wanted you to know someone noticed." That one hit me harder than I expected. Still, nothing from my mom. No apology, no explanation until Monday night. I was brushing my teeth when my phone rang. It was her. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. "Hi, Mom." Silence. Then, very softly, "I didn't know it would go that far." I didn't say anything. I thought you'd come around. You always do. And when you didn't, I didn't know what to do." Her voice cracked. The lights went off, and it was just so quiet. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt sad. Sad that it had to come to this for her to hear the silence she'd been forcing me to live in for years. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, almost whispering. You didn't have to mean it, I replied. You just had to stop it. Once. Just once. But you never did. Another long silence. Finally, she asked, can we talk? Just talk. I agreed to meet her for lunch the next day. Public place, neutral ground. She showed up 15 minutes early, hair brushed, makeup on, but her eyes looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. Not old, just fragile. Human. We talked. We really talked about everything. Dad, the way she leaned on me, the way I let her, the expectations I kept trying to meet, hoping she'd one day say she was proud of me instead of just grateful. She didn't make excuses. That surprised me more than anything. She owned it. Not perfectly, but enough. I think I got used to thinking of you as the strong one, she said. But strong doesn't mean invincible. And I used you like you were. When I got home later that day, there was a small envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a note in my sister's handwriting. I know I went too far. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do owe you a thank you. And a check. There was a personal check enclosed. Not for the full party amount, but enough to show she'd actually tried. I haven't cashed it yet. I might not, because the money was never really the point. The point was finally standing up and saying, enough. I kept that check in a drawer for almost 2 weeks. Every time I opened it to grab a pair of socks or pull out my old baseball cap, I'd see the edge of that ivory envelope peeking out, just waiting. It wasn't just money. It was an apology in ink. A gesture I never thought I'd get from Madison. And yet, every time I looked at it, I still didn't feel the urge to deposit it. Because here's the thing about apologies. They're not currency. They're not coupons you can cash in to erase the past. They're supposed to mean something, not just cost something. And after years of being treated like an afterthought with a bank balance, I needed time to figure out what I wanted to do with mine. Instead of focusing on that, I started redirecting my energy toward the one person I'd neglected the most. Myself. Started small. I signed up for a pottery class on Wednesday nights. I was the youngest person in the group by at least 15 years, but I didn't care. There was something peaceful about sinking your hands into clay and forming something with your own effort. No one asked me for money there. No one rolled their eyes when I spoke, and no one looked at me like I was a backup generator that flickered on when the real adults ran out of power. I also started volunteering at a local youth center downtown, helping kids with college applications. I didn't advertise it, didn't post about it, just showed up twice a week and gave them the kind of support I wish someone had offered me when I was figuring everything out alone. It felt good to give without expectation, to offer help where it was wanted, not just taken. And slowly, something inside me began to settle. It wasn't until about a month after the engagement party that things started to truly shift with my family. Madison reached out first, not with another check, not with another excuse, but with an actual effort. She invited me to lunch, this time at a place I liked, not some trendy vegan fusion cafe that made me feel like an intruder. When I arrived, she was already seated, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. She looked small, nervous, real. I know I can't undo everything, she said before I even sat down. And I know I've been awful to you, not just at the party but for years. I used you like a safety net and resented you when you weren't a trampoline. I thought that because you never fought back you were fine. But I see now that you weren't. And I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. I just let the silence hang in the air like a fragile truce. I watched her squirm for a second, then finally exhale. I'm in therapy now, she added. I didn't go because of you. I went because Chase and I had a huge fight after the party. He told me I treat people like they're replaceable. And for the first time, I realized maybe I do. That was the first moment I actually believed her. We talked for over an hour. Not just about the party, about childhood, about Dad, about the way things always revolved around appearances and survival, and how we all got twisted up inside that dysfunction. She didn't cry, neither did I, but we were honest. It was a good start. My mom was next. After the lights got shut off and the bills stopped being magically paid, she had a hard few weeks. But unlike before, she didn't just blame me to everyone within earshot. She got help. She started budgeting, downsized her cable package, canceled her subscriptions, even picked up part-time work again. Nothing glamorous, but steady. We met up for coffee one Saturday, and she surprised me by saying, "I didn't realize how much of my self-worth I'd attached to having things I didn't earn, and how much I expected you to shoulder just so I wouldn't have to admit I'd fallen short." I stared at her for a moment. "What changed?" "You did," she said. "And when you stopped carrying everything, I had to look in the mirror. And it wasn't flattering." She handed me a small envelope, another one. This time it wasn't a check. It was a card. Inside was a picture of me at age 10, standing next to a science fair project made from a cardboard box and tin foil. There was a ribbon on it, second place. On the back of the photo, in shaky handwriting, she'd written, "I never told you how proud I was that day. I should have. I'm telling you now. That photo is framed on my bookshelf now. And as for Chase, I won't pretend we became best friends. But something interesting happened a few weeks after everything settled. He reached out and asked if I wanted to grab a drink. Just the two of us. I almost said no, but curiosity won again. He was quieter than usual, less smug, less sales pitchy. "I didn't realize how much Maddie leaned on you," he said after his second drink. "And I didn't understand how much pressure that must have put on you. I always thought you were just distant. But now I get it. You weren't distant. You were worn out." That was as close to an apology as I was ever going to get from him. And weirdly, it was enough. Months passed. The wedding planning resumed, scaled down, less flashy. Madison actually insisted on paying for most of it herself this time. She even offered to reimburse me for the full cost of the engagement party, even though she knew I'd already canceled the payment before it was charged. I told her to keep the money, use it for something she and Chase really needed, like therapy or a decent honeymoon or, God forbid, a joint savings account. She laughed, genuinely laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed with her. Now, almost a year later, things aren't perfect. They never will be, but they're better. I still keep boundaries. I still say no, and sometimes I still feel that old tug. The urge to fix everything, to pay the bill, to smooth the tension. But now I recognize it for what it is. A habit formed out of years of guilt and survival. And I remind myself that I'm not responsible for keeping everyone else afloat, especially if it means drowning myself. I didn't go back to being the dependable one. I became the authentic one, the one who shows up when it matters, but doesn't light himself on fire to keep everyone else warm. And the funny thing is, now that I've stopped bending over backward, people actually respect me more. I kept the bracelet. Madison never asked for it back. It sits in a velvet box in my closet. An expensive reminder that sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is walk away. And if you're wondering about the check, I finally shredded it. Because no amount of money could ever repay what I've reclaimed since I stopped being their silent support beam and started being my own foundation. And honestly, it feels pretty. Now on to the next story. Story 6. When I was 17, my mom said, "You're dead to this family. Don't come back without success." She changed the locks that night. 20 years later, I watched her cry in court as she was evicted for fraud. Now, she calls me every day from a motel, whispering, "Please send money." But today, I was 17 the last time I saw the inside of that house. My duffel bag was already in the car when Mom said it. She didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even blink. She just looked at me like I was a smudge on the table she was tired of wiping off. "You're dead to this family. Don't come back without success." Then she turned around and walked back inside. I didn't have keys anymore. That night, the locks were changed. I wasn't caught doing drugs or flunking out of school or stealing or anything like that. No, I was kicked out because my older brother Lucas had just landed a city job and his girlfriend was moving in with him. They wanted my room. Simple as that. I was the spare, the backup kid. And since Lucas was bringing home a paycheck and shiny enough accomplishments to make the neighbors gossip, suddenly there wasn't space in the house for a second son who was still figuring things out. They made it sound like it was for my own good, that I needed to learn how to be a man, that I'd thank them one day, but the truth was crueler. I was inconvenient, and my brother's success gave them the perfect excuse to get rid of me. I remember standing in the driveway holding a bag of clothes and a folder with my community college enrollment papers, realizing I had no home. I took a bus to Cincinnati that same week. My mom's cousin lived there and, through some last-minute mercy, her husband said I could crash in their basement for a few months. They didn't know what to do with me either, but at least they didn't pretend I was family one moment and then toss me like trash the next. I worked at a gas station first, took any extra shifts I could get. I finished school in chunks. I met my wife, Sarah, in an adult education accounting class when I was 24. We got married a year later. Had our first kid by 27. The second followed 2 years later. I didn't try to reconnect with my parents. Not once. I figured they were happy riding Lucas's coattails. His girlfriend became his wife. I heard they got a place together with a pool, a nice car. Dad was always bragging about how Lucas made the family proud. I was just some footnote they didn't mention anymore. For 20 years, not a word, not a text, not a letter, not even a birthday card for the kids. And honestly, I didn't expect one. I didn't even tell my own kids about them. They grew up knowing my wife's parents as their only grandparents. I figured some things are better left buried. And then last week, out of nowhere, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, I had to play it back 3 times. It was my mom's voice, soft, hoarse, almost unfamiliar. "Ethan, I don't know if you'll even listen, but we need to talk. Please, it's important. Please call me back." I didn't. Not that day. Not the next. But curiosity has a way of clawing at you. I ended up Googling their address out of sheer boredom. And that's when the first real surprise hit. The house was listed as foreclosed. Auction pending. That's when the second call came in. Not my mom this time, it was Lucas. I hadn't heard his voice since I was a teenager, but I knew it instantly. He was frantic, talking fast, begging. Their accounts were frozen. Their assets seized. Fraud charges. IRS investigation. He kept saying it wasn't his fault, that someone had misled them, that they were victims of a financial scheme. Then he said it. The words that I never thought would leave his mouth. "We need your help." 20 years gone, and just like that, they remembered I existed. I agreed to meet them the next morning. Not because I missed them. Not because I wanted to fix anything. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes. The collapse, the fallout. After 20 years of silence, they suddenly remembered I existed, and I needed to know why. They were holed up in a tired-looking motel off Route 38. One of those weekly rate places where the front desk is behind bulletproof glass and the vending machines eat your money without apology. I knocked twice. There was a pause long enough to make me think they might not answer, and then the door opened. It was Mom. She looked smaller somehow, like the years had drained the weight right out of her. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine for a second, then away. She didn't say anything, just moved aside and let me walk in. The room smelled like mildew and reheated takeout. Dad was on the bed surrounded by stacks of legal papers, flipping through them like there might be a version that told a better story. Lucas was pacing in the corner, wearing a hoodie that looked too expensive for the situation they were in. His wife sat on the edge of the bathtub arguing on speakerphone with some attorney about frozen accounts. The TV was on mute, showing a news ticker that might as well have been about another planet. Nobody said they were happy to see me. Nobody asked about my kids or my wife or where I'd been all these years. They just got to the point. Lucas had been caught running a fake investment firm. It started as a consulting business, then turned into a Ponzi scheme. People lost money, a lot of it. When it all came crashing down, he pulled my parents into it. Used their names, their credit, their house. They'd signed everything without asking too many questions. Trusting Lucas, the golden child, their pride. Now the government had the house, the accounts, everything. Court was in 2 days. Fraud charges, eviction order, outstanding fines. They were already halfway out the door. All they needed now was someone to help buy some time. I listened. I nodded. I asked a few questions, mostly just to hear how they'd spin it. Nobody took real responsibility. Lucas kept saying they were victims of bad advice. Dad blamed the banks. Mom didn't say much. She just stared at the floor like it might split open and swallow her. I told them I'd think about it. Then I left. Mom followed me out into the parking lot. She said my name like it was a prayer. Asked if I remembered the spare key under the flower pot by the front steps. Of course, I remembered. It stayed there even after they changed the locks. The next morning, I went to the courthouse. I sat in the back, didn't say a word, just watched. The judge was calm, direct. The charges weren't minor. They weren't misunderstood. Lucas knew what he was doing, and the paper trail proved it. My parents were named in the documents, their signatures all over the property transfers and credit lines. The judge issued the eviction order without hesitation. They had 7 days to vacate. Mom cried when the words were read out loud. Not loud sobbing, just that quiet kind of crying that you don't try to stop. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Lucas didn't blink. He was still in control in his head, like he thought he'd talk his way out of this somehow. I walked out before they saw me. That night, I made 2 calls. One to a lawyer I trusted, and one to a financial guy I'd worked with before. I asked what it would take to clean the slate, get them off the hook, stop the court process, and get them into a rental with a few months buffer. The answer came back quick. About $30,000, give or take. I wired the money the next morning. No call, no warning, no message, just an anonymous payment with the account details buried in the routing instructions. My name was on it, but barely. They knew, though. Within 2 hours, I got a call from my mom's number. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail I still haven't deleted. She was crying again, whispering that they didn't deserve it, that she was sorry, that she wished she'd done everything differently. I let the message play through once, then again, and then I put my phone down. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel angry, just empty. 3 days after the wire hit their account, Lucas sent me a text. No thank you, no explanation, just an address and a thumbs-up emoji. It was a small rental house on the far edge of town. Cheap, forgettable neighborhood. I ignored the message. I figured that was the end of it. I'd done more than enough. Then, on Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I was in the backyard patching up a fence post. My wife was inside with our daughter baking something that was turning the whole house into a sugar cloud. Our son was in the garage breaking and fixing the same scooter for the 5th time that week. Normal Sunday stuff. I opened the door and there she was, my mother, holding a cardboard box like it was the Ark of the Covenant. She didn't say hi, didn't ask if she could come in. Just stood there blinking fast like she hadn't practiced what to say past the walk to the door. She said she found some of my things in storage and thought I might want them. Old notebooks, a few school papers, my 3rd grade baseball glove, a faded sketchbook. I didn't invite her in. I didn't even say much. Just stood there while she set the box down and said she was thankful for what I'd done. She tried to smile before she turned around and walked back to an Uber that was waiting down the block. I watched it drive away until it disappeared around the corner. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the dining table and opened the box. First, it was just stuff, nothing I'd missed. But near the bottom, wedged inside an old high school planner, was something that didn't belong. Printouts of an email chain, dozens of pages. Back and forth between Lucas and someone named Brent Warner. I didn't recognize the name, but it was all business talk. Land transfers, hidden liabilities, dummy corporations. And then there it was, my dad's name in a reply. Looks good to me. As long as the house is protected, I don't care what name's on the papers. That was dated 2 years before the indictment. They knew. They were in on it. It wasn't some innocent mistake. They weren't victims. They played a part willingly and lied to my face in that motel room. Sat there asking for help like they'd been blindsided. I stared at those pages for a long time. I thought about my wife asleep upstairs, the kids just down the hall. I told them almost nothing about my family. Always said it was just complicated. Truth was, I was trying to protect them from the chaos I grew up in. And now here I was neck deep in it again. The next morning, I drove by the rental house. I wasn't planning to go in. I just wanted to look, see how they were living, maybe say one final thing if I had the nerve. But something was off from the moment I pulled up. There was a car in the driveway, a black BMW, too new, too polished. Not the kind of thing someone drives after a foreclosure and a fraud investigation. A woman I didn't recognize stepped outside with 2 bags of groceries, dressed like she just walked out of a spa. A few seconds later, Lucas followed her out. He was laughing. They kissed. That wasn't his wife. I stayed parked down the block. Watched as he helped carry the bags inside like this was just a regular Tuesday. Like the last 2 months hadn't happened. He was clean, unbothered, smug. And just like that, the pieces started to connect. I followed him. Not closely, just enough to keep an eye on where he went next. 15 minutes later, he pulled into a gated complex across town. I waited a while, then drove past the entrance. Upscale apartments, valet parking, fountains in front. That's where he was living. He wasn't at the rental house. My parents were. Lucas had taken my money, cleaned up their mess, and dropped them off like used furniture. He was already living his next lie. Probably told his new girlfriend some version of the story where he was the victim, the hero, the misunderstood genius. I knew that version well. It was the same one my parents believed for decades. And now I was the idiot who'd handed him the escape plan. 2 days later, I got a text from Mom. She asked if I could help with groceries. Said the rental didn't come with a fridge and they were eating out of a cooler. I ignored it. The next day, another message, this time from Dad. Said the utility company was threatening to shut off the gas. Wanted to know if I could spot them a little extra until Lucas got things sorted. I waited. The third message came from Mom again, and this one caught me off guard. She sent a photo of an overdue medical bill, something about tests she needed. Said she wasn't asking for herself, just letting me know in case I wanted to help. I finally called her. I told her I'd already given them $30,000, that it was enough to get them out of their hole and give them a clean start, and that I wasn't their bank. I was polite, calm, even said I was glad they were safe now. She didn't argue, just said okay, like she knew it was coming, like maybe she even expected it. That night, Lucas called. He didn't ask for money. He just wanted to clear the air. Said he knew things had gotten messy. Said he'd moved out because the stress was affecting his marriage and that his wife needed space. I told him I saw him with someone else. There was a long silence. Then he laughed, said, "You always were good at digging." And then he hung up. 2 days later, my mom called again. I didn't pick up. Then again and again. It became daily, always around the same time, like she was setting a timer, whispering voicemails, asking for a little money or just to talk or just to hear my voice. Said Dad wasn't doing well, that they might need to move again, that Lucas was busy and had his own life now. No acknowledgement of the betrayal. No apology, just a new script. One where I was suddenly the reliable son, the one they could turn to. I didn't respond. I focused on my own life, my job, my kids, my wife, who never once pressured me to do more or less than what I already had. She trusted my judgment, and she was right to. But then something strange happened. I started getting notifications from Facebook. People I hadn't heard from in years. Family members from my dad's side, second cousins, distant relatives. Some were messaging me. Some were tagging me in posts I couldn't see. I logged in, something I almost never do, and there it was, a post from my mother. A long one, public. She wrote about betrayal, about how some people turn their backs on their blood, how they pretend to be saviors but are only interested in revenge, how after everything, they were abandoned by their own son. My name wasn't in it, but it didn't have to be. The comments were full of pity. Old family friends saying they were heartbroken for her. Distant relatives offering prayers. Even someone from our old church saying they couldn't believe Ethan would do that. That's when I knew none of this would ever change. Not the lies, not the rewriting of history, not the guilt games. They didn't want help. They wanted control. And I wasn't giving it to them anymore. After I saw the post, I closed the laptop and didn't open it again for 3 days. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't even mention it when my cousin Greg, one of the few from my family who ever treated me like a human being, texted me with a screenshot asking, "You seeing this crap?" Yeah, I'd seen it. And I'd seen enough. I waited a few days to cool off. Took the kids hiking on Saturday. Watched my daughter try to rescue every bug on the trail. Watched my son finally fix that scooter with a part he'd welded himself. Sarah made her famous chili Sunday night, and we sat around the table laughing about something I've already forgotten. Normal, quiet hours. On Monday morning, I packed up the box my mom brought and drove it to the donation center. I kept the email thread, the only real thing of value in there. Everything else went into the bin. Then I deleted their numbers from my phone, blocked them on Facebook, and set my email to filter anything with their last name straight into trash. I was done. 2 days later, they showed up at my office. I saw them through the glass before they even reached reception, my mother and father looking completely out of place in the lobby. My dad was holding some envelope, like this was going to be a formal exchange of words or apologies. Like this was a business deal. I met them in the parking lot before they could come in. Told them we weren't going to do this here. Told them they needed to leave. My dad started talking, but I cut him off. Told him everything I had to say was said already with $30,000. That was the end of the line. I reminded him I had my own family now, that he never once asked about his grandkids. Not one birthday, not one hello. That this sudden interest in my life had nothing to do with love and everything to do with convenience. My mom said something about family being forever. I told her that was true until they made it temporary. They left. A week went by. No calls, no texts. Then too, I started to feel the dust settling. The house felt lighter. My kids never asked questions. They didn't even know who those people were. They just knew Dad seemed calmer. Then I got an email from HR. Someone had left a negative voicemail with the company line claiming I was funneling corporate money to family members. Anonymous but dumb. My boss forwarded it to me with a note. You might want to handle this. I laughed because it was desperate and because they were running out of ways to reach me. I didn't reply, didn't need to. My reputation was clean, my records were solid. And the company knew me better than my own parents ever had. I told Sarah everything that night. Finally, the whole story. The emails, the court, the 30 grand, the BMW, the fake posts, the parking lot, all of it. She listened, didn't interrupt once, and when I was done, she just nodded and asked one thing. You done? I said, yeah. Good, she said. Because they don't get any more of you. 2 months passed. Quiet ones. No calls, no emails, no surprise visits, no cryptic Facebook posts either. It was like someone finally told them to cut it out or they just got bored when the money ran dry. Whatever the reason, it felt like the storm had passed. And for the first time in a while, I actually believed it was over. Then I got a letter. Not an email, not a voicemail, a real letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name spelled wrong. Ethan. On the envelope. Inside one page. Typed. You may want to know what's coming. Ask your brother. That's it. No signature, no threats, just that one line. I wasn't scared, but I was curious, because if there's one thing I've learned about people like my brother, it's that they don't know when to quit. But they also never do anything without a selfish reason. So I called Greg, my cousin in Cincinnati, and told him what I got. He just sighed and said, You're going to love this. Turns out Lucas had launched a new company. Not under his name, under mine, or close enough. Ethan Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware with a fake address. My cousin spotted it because he checks legal records obsessively ever since getting burned in a bad real estate deal years ago. Lucas had been using my identity, altered just slightly, to apply for business lines of credit and loans. All under the radar. Nothing massive yet, but enough to raise red flags. Enough that if something went sideways, it would land in my lap. That was the real reason they'd gone quiet. He didn't want me snooping around. Didn't want me seeing what he was building on my name. I called my lawyer immediately. We started locking everything down. Identity monitoring, credit freezes, notifications, the works. I filed reports, sent cease and desist letters, and pulled public records until every fake LLC tied to my name was flagged. Then I did one more thing. I posted just one message on Facebook, my first in years, to anyone following recent drama. I gave my family $30,000 to help them recover from a fraud case they were involved in. They used that money to lie, manipulate, and tried to profit off my name. I won't be helping them again. I've said nothing for years, but now the truth is public. If you think that's cruel, feel free to unfollow. I'm at peace. They are not my problem. The fallout was fast. A few comments, some distant relatives chiming in with the usual, "This is between family garbage." But something had shifted. A few people messaged me privately apologizing, saying they didn't know the full story. One even told me Lucas had tried to pitch him a family investment fund just last month. That night, my mom called again. I didn't answer. She left a message. "Ethan, this has gone too far. People are turning against us. You've made your point. Just stop." I deleted it without listening to the rest. The next morning, I sat on the porch drinking coffee. My daughter came out in her pajamas and asked if we could go to the park later. I said yes. Behind her, Sarah stepped outside holding her phone. She handed it to me. It was Lucas, his name trending. Not because of me, but because someone else finally pressed charges. Another fraud, bigger this time. A woman in Arizona. 6 figures missing. The news had it all. His name, his fake company, a blurry mugshot from the airport. I smiled. Not because he got caught, but because it had nothing to do with me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their mess. I was free. Now on to the next story. Story 7. This meal is for people who have our back, my dad said while toasting my brother, whom I financed the car for. Let's not pretend. I put down my glass, nodded, and drove home. The next day, the watch warranty was revoked, the shared card was canceled, and their mortgage payment bounced. My phone exploded with missed calls. I just texted. I was furious. I sat there at that table wondering why I keep showing up for people who only remember I exist when they need something. The worst part was I knew they didn't even want me there. The dinner was for my brother. He had just landed some job in marketing. Nothing spectacular, but the way my parents acted, you'd think he cured cancer. My mom booked a table at Campanella, one of those places where the lights are low and the wine list has its own leather folder. A few days before, she dropped it into a text. "We're doing dinner for Ryan on Friday. You can come if you want." Like it was a community event and she wasn't sure if I'd fit in. I showed up right on time. Of course I did. I always did. Still, nobody seemed to notice. My mom was fussing with the wine menu. My dad and Ryan were mid-story, laughing about something involving his new manager. The only open seat was across from Ryan, next to my dad. I sat down, poured myself a glass from the bottle I brought. One of the good ones, something I knew they wouldn't splurge on themselves, and waited for someone to acknowledge me. They didn't. The conversation stayed centered around Ryan's new condo, new job, new car, all the things I had helped make possible. No one mentioned that, of course. No one talked about how Ryan called me 5 months ago desperate for help with the down payment. How he needed someone to co-sign the car loan. How his credit wasn't good enough on its own. He promised to pay me back. Said it was just to get him started. And me? I wanted to be part of the family. I wanted to be needed. So I said yes. They laughed and toasted and told stories about Ryan's grind. I stayed quiet, chewing through overpriced calamari and nodding like some distant relative who barely made the guest list. Then my dad stood up. He raised his glass, faced Ryan and said, "This meal is for people who have our back." There was a pause. Then he smiled and added, "Let's not pretend." I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, then at my brother, then at my wine. Nobody corrected him. Nobody said anything at all. I set my glass down, stood up, and told them I had work in the morning. No goodbyes, no hugs. I left, walked to my car, and drove home without turning on the radio. The next morning, I opened the credit card app and shut it down. The shared card they used weekly, closed. I went to the warranty site for my dad's watch and canceled the service I paid for. Then I logged into the bank portal and halted the mortgage payment that came out of my account every month. That house, it was technically under my name, my credit, my risk. They knew it. They just didn't talk about it. By mid-morning, the calls started. 3 from my mom. Frantic voicemails asking if something was wrong. 2 from my dad. 1 text. Mortgage payment bounced. Is this a mistake? And Ryan. He went straight to panic. First "Hey bro, you good?" Then 4 missed calls. Then a screenshot of his bank balance and a sad emoji. I didn't answer. I sent them all the same text. Let's not pretend. I thought silence would speak for itself. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd sit with what they said, with what they didn't say, and realize the weight of it. That someone in the family would reach out like they actually meant it. But I was wrong. They didn't pause. They panicked. It started the next morning. I hadn't even made coffee yet when I got a string of texts from Ryan. No apologies, just confusion like, "Yo, what's going on with the card?" And, "Did you cancel it by mistake?" As if this was all some accidental glitch. I ignored him. 10 minutes later, he was outside my apartment. He didn't knock right away. I watched him through the blinds. He paced for a bit, checked his phone, then finally knocked lightly like he didn't want to wake a neighbor. I didn't answer. He knocked again, then sent a message while standing there. "Come on, man. Don't make this weird. We're brothers." I stood still, heart pounding, not from guilt, but from restraint. Because if I opened that door, I wouldn't be calm. I didn't know him peace anymore. So I waited. He eventually left. And 20 minutes later, he was posting on Instagram from some trendy cafe, smiling with a cappuccino like nothing had happened. The same jacket I bought him last Christmas was zipped halfway up. The car I paid for was parked right outside behind him in the photo. Then it was my mom's turn. She called 3 times in an hour. When I didn't answer, she sent a voice message. I listened to the first 10 seconds and turned it off. Her voice cracked, not with guilt, but with that same condescending worry she always used when I was too emotional growing up, like I was throwing a tantrum. A few hours later, I got a long text. She said I had taken things too personally, that I must have misheard the toast. She said it was just a joke and I was always too sensitive. Then she hit me with a line that made my jaw clench. "This family has always been there for you. Don't erase that over one dinner." One dinner. That's all it was to them. Just a little slip-up. They didn't want to see that this wasn't about the toast. It was about everything before it. Years of being tolerated instead of appreciated. Years of being useful instead of loved. I went to my desk and pulled up the car loan documents. Everything was in my name, my credit, my income, my risk. He couldn't have gotten it without me. He barely even skimmed the forms when I handed them to him. He just said, "Thanks, bro, seriously?" and started looking up rims. Then came the email from my dad. Subject: "Let's clear the air." No salutation, no warmth, just a cold paragraph about how he'd always taught us to keep money and emotions separate and how maybe I'd gotten too involved. He said I was taking a controlling role and making the family uncomfortable. He even said I might need to rethink how I view loyalty. That one hit me different. Not because it was harsh, but because it was so distant, like I was some external threat instead of his son. That night, I got a fraud alert on the shared credit account I had shut down. Someone, definitely one of them, had tried to access it. I checked the logs. It was from my parents' zip code. I also got a call from the watch warranty company saying someone tried to impersonate me to reinstate the coverage. They flagged the account. My name was locked, account sealed. By day 3, they were out of moves. I saw the mortgage payment fail again, this time with a bounce transaction attempt from an old checking account I had once added them to for emergencies. They were grasping now. Then came the message from Ryan. No greeting, no apology. Just this: "You're blowing this up for no reason. I didn't ask you to do all that. You offered." Like none of it mattered. Like he hadn't begged for help on the phone 6 months ago, crying because he couldn't keep taking the bus to interviews. Like I hadn't told him I'd take care of it, and he hadn't said, "You saved my life, man." It was gone. All of it erased the moment I stopped being useful. That night, I logged into the vehicle account, called the bank, and scheduled a repossession. I wasn't making a point anymore. I was taking back what was mine. The truck came at 6:47 a.m. I watched it pull up from my car down the block. I wasn't going to miss this part. I needed to see it. Not out of spite, but clarity. Proof that I wasn't just imagining all those years I gave and got nothing in return. Ryan's car was right there in their driveway. Same as always. He always parked like the driveway was his personal showroom. It still had the custom plate, his Instagram handle. I paid for that too. The repo guy did it fast. No knock, no warning. Hooked it in under 90 seconds. Ryan must have been sleeping. He didn't show up until the back wheels were already off the ground. He ran outside in socks and gym shorts, yelling something I couldn't hear. The driver just handed him a paper and got back in the truck. Ryan threw it on the grass. He was on his phone before the truck was even gone, probably calling me. I didn't answer. That afternoon, the text started again. He wasn't angry, not at first. He went straight for guilt. Told me I embarrassed him. Said he had a date that night and now he had to explain why he was taking the bus. Told me people in the neighborhood saw the truck and asked questions. I let him text. Then my mom called again. She left a voicemail this time. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't apologize. She just said, "Whatever point you're trying to make, Robert, you've made it. Enough is enough." Enough for who? I spent the rest of that day going through old financial records. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remember how much I had done, all the things they'd conveniently forgotten. I found the lease I'd co-signed on for Ryan back in 2019. He had broken it early and never paid the penalty. I covered it. I found the $900 I sent my mom when the refrigerator broke down, the same fridge they told their neighbors Ryan bought. I found emails from the bank showing how I negotiated a lower interest rate for their mortgage and then had it put under my name so they could refinance without getting denied again. That evening, I sent them all one text. "Let's have a meeting. All of you. Tomorrow, my place, 6 p.m. I didn't expect them to agree, but they did. I think they thought I was going to undo everything, say it had gone too far, apologize for the drama, maybe even offer more money. That's what I used to do. They arrived together the next day. My dad didn't sit. My mom brought some store-bought pastries like we were having tea. Ryan looked tired. The first thing he said was, "I need the car back, man." I held up a folder and placed it on the coffee table. Inside was everything. Loan documents, transfer receipts, bank statements. I let them sit with that for a second. Then I told them it was over. No more payments, no more cards, no more favors. Ryan laughed. Not a real laugh, more like disbelief. My mom asked me what they were supposed to do. My dad said, "You're really going to turn your back on your own family over a toast?" I said nothing. I opened the door and waited. They left one by one, not saying much. My mom lingered a little, but I didn't look at her. She walked out. That night, I blocked all three of them, and I slept better than I had in years. 3 days passed. No texts, no calls, not a single knock on my door. I figured maybe they were letting it sink in, maybe trying to process the fact that I wasn't going to come running this time. But deep down, I knew better. My family never reflected. They just retaliated. On Friday morning, I got a notification from the credit monitoring app one use. New inquiry detected. Then another. I opened the app and stared at the screen. Someone had used my name, address, and social security number to apply for 2 credit cards. They weren't even trying to hide it. I already knew where it came from. A few years ago, I helped my parents file taxes and printed everything for them. SSNs, W-2s, full copies. They kept it all in a cabinet in the hallway, labeled and organized like a library. I had assumed it was safe. That assumption was gone now. I filed a fraud report, froze my credit, changed every password I'd ever used, every account, every backup email. By noon, they started the real performance. Ryan posted a long Facebook status, passive-aggressive, full of dramatic pauses and vague accusations. It was about false generosity and how some people use money to control and manipulate under the mask of helping. No names, just enough details so everyone could fill in the blanks. He wrote, "Family means love, not debt." People started commenting, old family friends, distant cousins. Some of them liked the post. Others sent me DMs asking what happened. I didn't reply. There wasn't a single version of the truth they'd be willing to hear. That night, I got home and saw something on my doormat. My spare house keys, the ones I gave my mom years ago. They were in a Ziploc bag sitting under a receipt from a bakery. She didn't even write a note, just the receipt with her name printed at the top. I stood there staring at it for a while. Felt like a final gesture. Not a goodbye, more like a warning. The next day, I got a call from my landlord. He sounded confused. Someone had called the office claiming to be me, asking to update the lease and transfer payment responsibility. When they asked for verification, the caller hung up. My landlord reported the attempt as suspicious. I didn't need to guess. It was either my dad or my brother. They were starting to get desperate. So I drove by the house. I didn't get out. I didn't knock. I just parked down the street and watched. Their lawn was uncut. The mailbox was stuffed. Ryan's bike was gone from the side gate and there were no cars in the driveway anymore. The house looked like it was holding its breath. Then Saturday evening, Ryan came back. This time he didn't come alone. He brought his ex. I remembered her, Alyssa. She looked uncomfortable, didn't say a word. He did all the talking, pacing on my porch like he was rehearsing something. He said he lost his job the day after the car got repossessed. Said he was trying to get a new one, but the interviews were all out of town and buses weren't cutting it. Said Alyssa had been helping him out, but it wasn't enough. He looked at me like we were in this together. I just need the car for a few weeks, Rob. I'll bring it back. I'll even pay something. I didn't respond. Then he said something that stopped me cold. Mom's talking about selling the house. I looked at him. She's not sleeping. Dad's taking meds now. This whole thing, it's killing them. He thought that would sway me, that guilt would bring me back in. He stepped forward. You think this is just about the car? I finally answered, no. I think it's about you needing me more than you ever admitted. Then I closed the door. I changed my phone number that night. It felt like pulling the last root out of a dead tree. Changing my number wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge. It was just something I should have done a long time ago. I didn't announce it. I didn't give them one last message. I didn't owe them that. But I should have known. They weren't going to let it go. 2 days later, my work phone rang during lunch. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. I picked up and didn't say anything. It was my mom. The second she heard silence, she started talking. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask if I wanted to talk. She jumped straight into it like she had been rehearsing. We're worried about you, she said. She said my dad was having trouble sleeping. Said Ryan hadn't been eating right, that he was depressed. She even said, your brother misses you. Like we were kids and I had just stormed out of the room over a video game. She didn't mention the fraud. She didn't mention trying to access my lease. No apology, no accountability, just concern, weaponized like always. Then she got to it. We need help, Rob. She said the mortgage company had sent a second notice, that the late fees were piling up, that their budget was stretched thin, that maybe just for a few months, I could help cover it again while they figured things out. Said she hated asking. But you're the one we can count on. I hung up. Later that day, an email came through, this time from my dad. He said he was trying to give me space, but was reaching out as a father who still believes in his son. The tone was calm, professional, even. He said the toast had been misinterpreted, that I took it the wrong way. He said it was meant to be a light moment, something to celebrate Ryan's win. Then came the second half, the real reason. He wrote that they'd missed 2 mortgage payments. The bank had sent a final warning. The house was at risk. He said they were considering all options, but maybe it didn't have to come to that. Maybe I could reinstate the auto payments. Maybe we could get back to how things were. He signed it, with love, Dad. Not a single word about the years I had propped them up. Not a word about what I gave or what they took. The next day, a letter showed up in my mailbox, handwritten. I recognized my mom's cursive before I even opened it. She wrote about when I was little, about my Halloween costumes, about bedtime stories, about how I used to fall asleep on her shoulder during road trips. She said she missed that version of me. Said I used to be thoughtful, gentle, that I had a heart. Then she shifted slowly into guilt. She said she and Dad were getting older, that they didn't have a plan, that they never expected this much distance between us. Then came the line that stuck with me. Don't let your pride destroy what's left of our family. Left. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I got a text from an old friend from college, someone I hadn't heard from in a while. He sent me a screenshot. It was from Ryan. Ryan had messaged him asking if he could talk some sense into me. Said I was spiraling. Said he was worried I was going to cut everyone off forever over a misunderstanding. Told him I probably regretted everything and just needed a nudge to come back. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. That's when I made my final decision. I drove to the impound lot where the car had been sitting. Told the guy at the desk I didn't want it back. Not to reclaim it, not to sell it. I had it towed to a locked garage under my name. Plates removed, insurance canceled, the title sealed away in a drawer. I wasn't giving it back. Not ever. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because it was never really theirs. They didn't respect it. They didn't earn it. And now, just like everything else they took from me, it was going to sit in silence, untouched, finished. The car was out of their lives, just like me. It's been 5 weeks. They haven't found a new way to contact me yet. Or maybe they finally gave up. Either way, the silence has settled in. My apartment feels different. It's quieter, not just because they're gone, but because I'm not checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for the next obligation, the next ask, the next crisis I'd be expected to fix. I've started doing small things, unremarkable things. Cooking meals I actually want. Going for walks without checking the time. Answering only calls I recognize. At night I sleep through. No tension in my jaw. No guilt waiting under the surface. A few days ago, I saw Ryan's Instagram pop up under a mutual friend's story. He was at some house party, smiling like nothing ever happened, but I noticed he was holding a bus pass in his hand. It was barely visible in the background, tucked behind his phone. I didn't linger on the image. I just closed the app and moved on. Last week, I got a letter from the mortgage lender addressed to me. They'd started pre-foreclosure on the house. I knew it was coming. I didn't read the whole thing, just skimmed enough to understand that they were out of time. The house I helped save 3 times was about to slip through their fingers. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. I felt distant, detached, like I'd woken up from a very long, very strange dream. My parents always made it seem like I was lucky they tolerated me, that I was too sensitive, too serious, too invested. They used those words often, and I swallowed them for years, thinking if I just did more, gave more, they'd stop looking at me like a guest in my own family. But they never did. I've learned that people who depend on you without respect never really love you. They just love the version of you that helps them stay afloat. The moment you stop being useful, the moment you ask for something in return, they call it betrayal. So no, I didn't burn the bridge. I just walked off it. And when I looked back, it was already on fire. I'm not going back. Not now. Not ever. 3 months have passed. Life settled into a rhythm I never thought possible. Peaceful, quiet, free. I barely hear from anyone. No calls, no letters, no social media pings. It's like I stepped off a stormy pier and onto solid ground. Then yesterday, I got a knock at my door at 8 p.m. I almost didn't answer. My instinct is to ignore unexpected interruptions, but something told me to open it. Standing there was a woman I didn't recognize. Early 40s, soft eyes. She handed me an envelope and said, "I think this is yours." No more words. Inside was a single photograph and a notarized statement. The photo showed my brother Ryan. Bright eyes, messy hair. Leaning on a crumpled note, a receipt from a DMV. The notarized letter said Ryan had transferred ownership of a car to someone else. Not me. It was a restored 2008 hatchback, rusty but reliable. The note under the windshield wiper in the photo read, "For Robert. Thanks for everything when I needed it." Then there was a short handwritten letter from Ryan. "Rob, I was wrong. I took without understanding what I'd lost. This is not the fancy car. It's all I could get. My first car. I need you to have it. No strings. Love, Ryan." I stared at that letter for a long time. No guilt, no rush. Just recognition that something had changed. That maybe finally the family I thought I'd lost was trying to find a way back, even if in the smallest of gestures. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to call him. I set the letter and photo on my desk next to the folder of loan documents I still haven't thrown away. Tonight, I drove to the bank to recheck everything. I wanted to make sure this old hatchback wasn't some trick. But on the drive back, I realized it didn't matter. The car was intact. It was mine. No loans, no paperwork, just a gesture. I still don't know if I'll ever take that first step to reach out. Maybe I'll drive that car around town. Maybe I'll just let it sit in the garage for now. But for the first time, something inside me shifted. Not enough to forgive yet. Not enough to call it family again. but maybe enough to start wondering what could come next. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Parents mocked me for 5 years that my sister was better than me. She's a lawyer and you're a loser, they said, always laughing. But yesterday everything changed. Started 5 years ago, the day Olivia became a lawyer. She walked into my parents' house with her diploma in one hand and a job offer in the other, and from that moment on, she was a queen and I was nothing. My parents were never the kind to hide their favorites, but after that, it wasn't just favor, it was ridicule. She's a lawyer and you're a loser, my dad said it first at a family dinner. And my mom laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. Olivia didn't even bother pretending to feel bad. She just smiled and sipped her wine like she was already too important to care. From then on, it became a running joke every holiday, every birthday, every stupid Sunday dinner I was dragged to. If I mentioned my job, my parents would roll their eyes. If I talked about something I was working on, my mom would say, "Maybe someday you'll finally figure out what you're doing." My father would sigh and shake his head. And Olivia, she got worse over time. Nate the nobody, she once called me in front of a room full of relatives. You should put that on your business card. It went on and on. When Olivia bought a new car, my parents made sure to bring it up every 5 minutes, asking me when I'd finally get something better than my cheap little death trap. When she bought a condo, they asked me when I was going to stop renting like a college kid. When she went on vacation, they reminded me that maybe if I'd worked harder, I could afford to do something fun. I argued, I defended myself, I ignored them, I even stopped showing up for a while. Nothing worked. As soon as I walked through their door, I was the family joke again. The only people who ever had my back were my grandparents. My grandpa once told my dad to knock it off, but my dad just laughed and said, "We're just having fun." My grandma told me she was proud of me no matter what, but it didn't change anything. Olivia was their golden child, and I was the failure they wished they could forget. Then yesterday happened. It was late when my phone rang, almost midnight. It was Olivia. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. She was crying, drunk, panicked. She needed a favor. I had already done her one 6 months ago. She called me out of the blue and asked to borrow money. She was in a jam, she said. Just until my bonus comes in. I didn't ask any questions. I just sent her $6,000 and told her to pay me back when she could. She never did. And now she called again, but this time it wasn't just about money. "I have nowhere to go," she sobbed. "Please, Nate." I should have told her no. I should have told her to find out. But instead, I asked her what had happened. And that's when I learned the truth. She had lost her job months ago. That was the first thing she admitted between hiccups and sobs. The high-paying, prestigious law job that my parents never shut up about? Gone. She was fired, but she wouldn't tell me why. I asked, and she just kept saying, "It doesn't matter. It was unfair. They were looking for a reason." I was too stunned to say anything. My sister, the golden child, the one who had looked down on me for years, the one my parents paraded around as their greatest accomplishment, was unemployed. It didn't make any sense. "What have you been living on?" I finally asked. Silence. Then she dropped the second bomb. She had burned through all her savings, maxed out her credit cards, and taken out loans. And when that wasn't enough, she had started asking Mom and Dad for help. This was the part that hit me the hardest. I sat there gripping the phone, trying to process what she had just said. "You went to them?" "Yes," she whispered. She had told our parents that she was struggling, not just once but for months. And what did they do? They helped her. They paid her bills, covered her expenses, and made sure she didn't suffer. The same parents who had mocked me for struggling, the same ones who had called me a loser, laughed at my job, and rolled their eyes at my choices. The same ones who had told me to stop whining when I needed support. They had secretly taken care of Olivia like she was a fragile little princess. But that wasn't the worst of it. She hesitated, then admitted that our parents weren't just helping her. They relied on her. Olivia had supported them for years. Their house, their vacations, the new furniture, the expensive dinners. The way they always seemed comfortable even though they were supposedly middle-class, hardworking people. It was all because of her. She had been throwing money at them all the time, and now she was out. She had nothing left. I had to move out of my apartment, she mumbled. I couldn't afford it anymore. I sold my car. I've got nothing left. I sat there stunned. The parents who had told me to man up and figure it out had been sucking up to their daughter all along. The people who mocked me for not making six figures were secretly relying on my sister's money to maintain their lifestyle. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I just asked, "So, what do you want from me?" Silence. Then she whispered, "I need help." I let that hang in the air for a long time. It was as if the universe had been turned upside down. My sister, who for years had looked at me as if I were beneath her, was now coming to me and begging for help. The golden child was no longer golden. She was desperate, broke, and alone. I should have felt sorry for her. Maybe the old me would have, but instead I started to laugh. I laughed so hard that I had to wipe my eyes, because suddenly I wasn't the loser anymore, and I knew exactly what to do next. I hesitated before letting Olivia move in. Every part of me wanted to say no, to tell her to figure it out like I'd been forced to do for years. But something in me, perhaps curiosity, perhaps something darker, wanted to see what would happen if she had no choice but to rely on me. She arrived early the next morning, dragging 2 suitcases and a duffel bag to my door. For someone who had always been so neat, she looked rough. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were wrinkled, and there was a distant, exhausted look in her eyes as if she hadn't slept in weeks. Emily, my friend, wasn't happy about the situation. She had been there for every cruel comment, every time Olivia made me the punchline of a joke, and she had never forgotten the way Olivia treated her. They had never liked each other, and now they had to live under the same roof. At first, Olivia hardly left the guest room. She avoided conversation, barely made eye contact, and didn't acknowledge the tension in the air. It was clear that she was embarrassed, but it was even clearer that she had no other options. It didn't take long for my parents to find out. My mother called first, her tone overly sweet, pretending to be casually checking in. There was no thank you, no sign that she had changed her mind about me, just a forced comment about how nice it was of me to help my sister. My dad, on the other hand, didn't even pretend. He called later and tried to convince me that Olivia would be better off living with them. That's when I realized what this was really about. For years, Olivia had been their symbol of success, their proof that they had raised a winner. Now she was living in my apartment, needing my help, completely dependent on me. It was a power shift they couldn't accept. They had spent years telling me I was a disappointment, and now the very daughter they had adored was struggling while I had my life together. They weren't just uncomfortable. They were desperate. The real bomb dropped a few days later. Olivia was on the phone with my mother in the kitchen, her voice soft, but not soft enough. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I could hear my mom's voice through the speaker, clear as day. She wanted Olivia to ask me for money. At first, I thought I had misheard, but then my mom kept talking, telling Olivia to find out how much money I had to see if I could help them out. 2. Hit me like a brick. For years, they had mocked me for struggling and laughed at me for not being as successful as Olivia. Now that Olivia was broke, they weren't just upset about her downfall. They were looking for a new source of money, and somehow, after years of being their failure, I had suddenly become their best option. I didn't know what Olivia would do. She looked panicked, caught between her loyalty to them and whatever shred of dignity she had left. But in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I had spent my whole life being the loser in her eyes. Now I was the golden child, and I wasn't going to let them use me the way they had used her. I didn't say anything right away. I just turned and left the kitchen, leaving Olivia sitting there with my mother's voice still coming through the speaker. She must have realized that I had heard everything, because after a few minutes, she came to find me in the living room. She looked nervous, as if she expected me to explode. I didn't. I just told her one thing. If she ever asked me for money on her behalf, she could pack her bags and leave. She didn't argue. She just nodded and walked away. But after that, things were different. The dynamic in the house changed. Olivia, who had always been the one looking down on me, now felt small. She wasn't confident anymore. She wasn't the person who used to throw snide remarks at me at every family gathering. She was quiet, uncomfortable, and for the first time in her life, insecure. Emily didn't make things any easier. She didn't rub Olivia's nose in it, but she didn't go out of her way to make her feel welcome, either. If anything, she avoided her completely, staying in our bedroom or making excuses to leave the apartment. I didn't blame her. She had every right to hate the situation. The real chaos began a few days later. My grandparents called and asked me to come over for dinner. They didn't say much, but I could tell something was up. When I got there, I immediately understood why. Olivia was there, sitting at the kitchen table, looking miserable. My parents were there too, their faces set in frustration. This wasn't a normal family dinner. This was a trap. As soon as I sat down, my dad started talking about family responsibilities and how we had to help each other out. My mom chimed in, saying that Olivia had done so much for all of us and now it was time for me to step up. I sat back in my chair and just let them talk. They weren't even hiding it anymore. They wanted my money. They tried to make it sound noble, like this was about family unity, but I knew what it really was. Olivia had been their bank account for years, and now that she was broke, they were scrambling. And somehow, I had become their next best option. I let them go on for a while, pretending to listen, but when they finally stopped, waiting for me to say something, I just smiled and said, I wasn't interested. Silence. My dad's face turned red. My mom tried to backpedal, pretending it wasn't about money, that they were just asking for support, but the desperation in her eyes said it all. Then the unexpected happened. My grandmother, who had been sitting quietly the whole time, suddenly spoke up. She turned to my parents and asked them how much money Olivia had given them over the years. She asked them how much they had taken from her. The room fell silent. My parents didn't answer, so my grandmother continued. She said that for years they had paraded Olivia around as the perfect child while they drained her financially. She said they had humiliated me for not being successful while secretly relying on their daughter to keep them afloat. And now that Olivia couldn't support them anymore, they were suddenly interested in me again. She stopped asking questions. She was angry. My grandfather chimed in too, shaking his head at my parents, calling them out for using their own children. I sat there and watched the whole thing unfold, realizing that for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being attacked. It was them. My parents tried to argue, tried to spin things, but the damage was done. My grandparents saw them for who they really were, and so did Olivia. She didn't defend them. She didn't say a word. She just sat there staring at the table, finally understanding what had really happened to her. And for the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. Regret. After my grandparents called my parents out, dinner ended in complete awkwardness. My mom barely touched her food. My dad kept tapping his fingers on the table, and Olivia looked like she wanted to disappear. No one had ever stood up to them like that before, especially in front of her family. When I got home, Olivia was already there. I expected her to be locked in the guest room like she had been all week, but instead, she was sitting on the couch staring at the floor. I didn't say anything, just walked past her to the kitchen. But then she spoke. "You were right," she said. I stopped. She didn't look at me, but she kept talking. She said that now she knew what they were doing. She admitted that they had used her, drained her, and the moment she couldn't give any more, they had tossed her aside like nothing. And she finally realized that all these years of looking down on me, she had been as blind as they had been. I didn't know how to react. For years, I had wanted this moment, for her to finally see it. But now that it was happening, I wasn't sure how I felt. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "They still think they're getting money from you." My stomach dropped. Apparently, after I left dinner, my parents pulled Olivia aside and told her to keep trying. They thought I was playing hard to get, that I just needed to cool off. They told her to convince me that I owed it to the family. That's when I realized this wasn't over. I wasn't just going to tell them no, I was going to finish this. The next morning, I went unannounced to my parents' house. My grandparents still lived there, and when my grandmother saw me at the door, she gave me a sad smile as if she already knew what was coming. I went straight into the living room where my parents were sitting. My dad was reading the paper. My mom was on the phone. They both looked up, surprised to see me. I didn't waste any time. I told them that I knew everything, that I knew Olivia had paid for their lives, that I knew they turned on her as soon as she was broke, and that I knew they were hoping I'd be their next meal ticket. They tried to deny it, but I wouldn't let them. I told them I was done with all of it. And then I told them something they weren't expecting. I was cutting them off. I wasn't just refusing to give them money. I was done being a part of their lives. Done being the punchline to their jokes. Done being the son they only cared about when they needed something. My mother's face turned pale. My father's jaw clenched. I had never seen them so speechless. Then, just as I was about to walk out, my grandmother did something that changed everything. She stood up and said she was done too. She told them she was ashamed of them, that she couldn't believe they had treated their own children like financial pawns. And then she dropped the biggest bomb of all. She and my grandfather had already talked. They were changing their will. Everything they had planned to leave my parents? Gone. I didn't even know they had money, but apparently they did, and now my parents weren't going to get any of it. My mother's eyes went wide. My dad finally stood up and looked like he was going to explode. But my grandmother wasn't finished. She turned to me and said that from now on, if anyone was going to inherit what they had, it was going to be me. I didn't want her money. I never did. But the look on my parents' faces, that moment of pure panic when they realized they had lost everything, that was the real legacy. And just like that, I walked out the door. I thought cutting them off would feel bigger, heavier, like a dramatic end to a lifelong struggle. But it didn't. It was quiet, simple, like closing a door and realizing you never have to open it again. At first, I expected some kind of explosion. My parents weren't the type to take rejection lightly, and I was right. The next morning, my mother called me 8 times. When I didn't answer, the texts started pouring in, long, manipulative messages about how I was being selfish, how family should stick together, how she couldn't believe I would do this to them. She played every card she had, from guilt to fake concern, even trying to make it seem like my grandparents were poisoning me against them. Then came my dad's message, and it was exactly what I expected. Grow up. Call me when you're done with this little tantrum. It was almost funny how predictable they were. They didn't care about fixing anything. They just cared about control. So I blocked them. After that, it got quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't have to deal with their voices in my head, their insults, their constant judgment. Olivia even seemed relieved. Without them pressuring her, she actually started acting like a normal person. She kept to herself, but she was different. Less cold, less entitled. She even apologized to Emily, admitting that she had been cruel to her for no reason. It didn't fix everything, but it was more than I ever thought she was capable of. Then, a week later, she dropped something unexpected. She told me she was leaving. Not just my apartment. She was leaving the city. She had found a job out of state. Nothing prestigious, nothing flashy. Just something stable enough to start over. She had finally realized that as long as she stayed around our parents, they would never stop trying to control her. They had drained her financially, broken her emotionally, and when she was no longer useful, they tossed her aside. She was done being their puppet. At first, I didn't know what to say. For years, she had been the one they worshipped, the one who had everything handed to her. Now she had nothing but a suitcase and a chance to start over. And for the first time, she didn't expect anyone else to fix it for her. The night before she left, she sat with me in the living room, staring at her hands as if she wanted to say something. After a long pause, she finally looked at me. "You've always been the stronger one." I didn't know what to say. Maybe there was nothing to say. The next morning, she packed her things and left. No drama, no begging, just a quiet goodbye. A few weeks later, my grandparents called. Apparently, my parents had come crawling back, trying to get back on their good side. My mom had started calling them regularly, pretending to care, while my dad was suddenly acting like he wanted to be the perfect son. They scrambled, but my grandparents weren't stupid. My grandfather told me that when my mother hinted at fixing the family, which was code for putting us back in the will, he shut her down immediately. "They reap what they sow," he said. That was the last I heard from them. I never talked to my parents again. I thought it would be harder, that some part of me would miss them or wonder if I had made a mistake. But the truth is, I felt lighter than I had in years. They had spent my whole life making me feel like I wasn't enough, and now, for the first time, I knew that I was more than they ever gave me credit for. They wanted a golden child? Turns out they picked the wrong one. Update. It's been a few months since I cut off my parents, and I wasn't planning on giving an update, but things have taken a turn I wasn't expecting. First, Olivia. She's actually doing well, much better than I thought. We don't talk much, but she texts me occasionally. She got a steady, normal job, nothing high-paying or flashy. But she seems relieved more than anything. She told me she started therapy, which honestly shocked me. Apparently, she's trying to unlearn the years of pressure, manipulation, and entitlement that came with being our parents' perfect child. She even admitted that she's embarrassed about how she used to treat me. I never thought I'd hear her say something like that, but here we are. Here's the part one wasn't expecting. My parents are in complete meltdown mode. Turns out they weren't just relying on Olivia for a little extra cash here and there. They were drowning in debt, and she had been covering for them more than I ever knew. My grandparents did some digging and found out that my parents had refinanced their house several times, taken out loans, and basically lived way beyond their means. Olivia's money had kept them afloat, and now that she was gone, reality hit them hard. First, they tried to get money from extended family. That didn't work. Then they tried again to guilt my grandparents into acting like victims. That definitely didn't work. My grandparents shut them down right away. And then, my mom decided to try one last thing. She emailed me. It was a long, dramatic mess of a letter filled with fake concern and guilt. She wrote about how she and my dad were in danger of losing everything and, as her son, I owed it to them to help. She threw in a bunch of nonsense about family looking out for each other and even had the nerve to say that they did their best for me. Then she pulled out the "be a man and take care of your parents" card. I didn't respond. A week later, my dad sent me an email that was much shorter but somehow even more ridiculous. "You think you've won, but you'll regret it when we're gone." I read it twice and started to laugh, because the truth is I did win. Not in the way they meant it, not in some petty revenge kind of way, but in the fact that I don't need them anymore. They spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough, like I was a failure. But now, they're the ones falling apart and I'm doing just fine. And the best part? For the first time in my life, I don't care what they think. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.